Okay, we have Professor Donald Hoffman. Thank you so much for your time. Very excited for this. MIT, you wrote a bunch of books, I think 90 very, very good papers that are easy to understand, cognitive science. And of course, how do you say this easy? I always relate what you do to if we were all born with meta glasses on, if we were all born with lenses from the metaverse, but way more advanced, nobody would know that we're all in a metaverse that doesn't really exist. So that's how I try to explain it. But, thank you for your time. And I just ruined what you created, which was interface theory, which is really awesome.
Well, thank you for having me, Tommy. It's a great pleasure. And I think your initial idea that you started off with here is great. I actually agree. I think that the ideas that I'm talking about may seem strange to many people, but in a few years, when people have spent a lot of time in the metaverse, it's going to be like, so what? Of course. So I think that the technology will just turn what seems crazy into that's obvious.
And then as we get into it, just to lay a base. So the way I look at the interface that you research, I believe you've proven it, is so when I'm born, when I had my daughter, she sees light. Light's what we see. So I say my daughter's name's Giabella. Giabella, that's the sun. That's the moon. My dad said, that's the sun. That's the moon. So now in my interface, computer, whatever you want to call it, I think that that's the sun. I project that being the sun, the moon, the stars, this building, that building. But that's what I'm projecting it to be because it's all I know, which then would relate to evolution in a sense, correct? Because over a period of time, it's almost being brainwashed in your own interface.
Right. The projection actually happens even before you are told words. So, right, your child isn't ready to understand words until they're about 18 months of age or so, 15, 18 months of age, and then they become word learners very quickly. What are they doing during that first 15 to 18 months? They're not just sitting there like bumps on logs. Their visual systems are very, very busy turning what William James called the blooming, buzzing confusion into a coherent world with objects in it, like the sun and the moon and tables and chairs. So by the time you actually get around to telling your daughter, oh, that's a spoon, or that's the moon, she already has a bunch of symbols in her head that she's projecting. She's already built her own little metaverse. And all you're doing is, you're assuming that your metaverse is very similar to her metaverse. And when you point and say spoon, right, how much are you really teaching her? That's not much. You're just pointing and saying spoon, and she gets it. Now that's close to a miracle, right? Unless there's some really interesting correspondence between your visual world and her visual world. And so the projection happened even before language happened, and language is sort of a simple add-on. But the interesting thing about language is that many spiritual traditions will tell us is that once you have a word, right? So there's the moon. You tend to just stick with the word and not be open to the mystery of the moon. It's easy to slip into, well, I know what it is. Well, no, you just have a little label for something that's completely beyond your imagination in terms of its complexity. So in that sense, you're right that we're projecting, in some sense, this trivial word like moon onto something that's far more complicated. And often that stops us from digging in deeper and finding out, what is this thing? Sometimes I should just let go of the word moon and stare in awe at that thing and recognize how little I know about it.
So then with this interface that we're living in, is that there when we're in the womb of our mothers? Is that already there?
Well, from a biological and evolutionary point of view, what we would say is that the genetic program is already there, and it's unfolding such that your nervous system will evolve in the womb, and then once you start getting stimulation outside of the womb, after you're born, it will evolve to have a set of visual objects that's very similar to most other people, not exactly the same. I mean, there are little variations, and some of us, for example, have certain strengths and weaknesses. Some of us are born less able to recognize faces, for example. Some people are born with what we call prosopagnosia, or various levels of prosopagnosia. So there's a lot of variation, but there's enough. And for example, in color, right? Some men are red-green colorblind, right? So there are these variations, but there's enough in common that we can talk to each other. Whereas I can't really talk to my cat, right? I can't talk about the moon to my cat. There's just not enough in common there.
I think Brad Pitt has that. Brad Pitt has where he can't recognize faces. He has a tough time recognizing. Is that? I think that's correct.
Yeah, I'm not sure about Brad, but prosopagnosia is not unusual.
Now, and another easy way I like to start off with this when I try to explain it. I don't know if it was on Lex I saw it or if in one of your books, which we're going to get to. If you take a cube, which I'm very jealous of people that could draw it, and it actually, when I was in high school, that used to piss me off because I can't draw a cube that looks like it's coming out, a three-dimensional cube.
I draw it on the paper sometimes.
Yeah, I know. Okay, good for you. Now, Professor, when you draw that cube, and I think that's a great example, it looks to us like it's coming out of the paper. That's what we project, but it's flat on the paper.
That's right.
So if you take that alone, and then you look at a building, you look at anything, you look at a cup, a drink, just based on that cube that you drew on that paper that looks to me like it's coming out, can relate to the entire interface that you're saying exists. Am I right?
That's right. If you think about it, your eye is like a camera, and the back of your eye has something called the retina, which is about 120 million photoreceptors. It's like a 120 megapixel camera, and it's only two-dimensional. It's not exactly flat. It is slightly curved, but it's only two-dimensional. So you get a two-dimensional image to your right eye and a two-dimensional image to your left eye. Whenever you see depth, anytime in the world, when you're driving your car on the freeway, when you see depth, you're hallucinating the depth. The image at your eye is flat. It's two-dimensional. So it's up to you to create the three dimensions. And there are people who can't do it. I mean, so there are some people who have trouble either with stereo vision or motion, depth for motion perception. So it's a real accomplishment on your part. So it's stunning to know that the volume that you see in the room around you right now is entirely hallucinated by you. And you do it all the time, and you just assume you're seeing the truth. No, you're making it up. And we really see this when we're trying to build computer vision systems, for example, to drive a car. If you think about what is a computer vision system on a car doing, it's going to have, at least with the passive vision systems, there are LiDAR and other active vision systems, but think about the passive vision systems in cars. They're like video cameras, and they're getting a flat image. So you might have a couple of video cameras, and they're getting flat images, and those images are basically saying it's this color at this point, and this color at this point. You have millions of numbers which just say, here's the color and brightness at this point. Here's the color and brightness. So you get all these colors and brightnesses. Okay, well, there's nothing about objects or cars or lanes or dividers of highways, nothing about that. You've got to, so when you actually build a computer vision system, you have to write tons and tons of really difficult software to take the video image and turn it into, oh, there's a boy on a bicycle. I better stop my car because I'll hit him. So that's an incredible, construction on your part. And so when we actually do computer vision systems, all of a sudden it becomes real. This isn't just sort of philosophy. If you want a computer vision system that works, you've got to realize that you're constructing all the depth and all the objects and all the motion, everything, you're constructing it all. It's not given.
And can you pull up tab 2 and go through Professor's books, because they're all so good and they're not hard to read. I thought at first they would be hard to read. That's why I was watching a lot, but they're not hard to read. So
that's great.
And to be able to explain something like this and be able to read it is pretty good. So with the car thing, so like they always talk about the self-driving cars, tab 2, yep. 3 and 4. With the self-driving cars, the only way that would work without catastrophe would be as if every single car was a self-driving car, basically talk to each other, use that interface, because then it could predict what car A, B, C is going to do, because they're all one, which is when we get to things with the universe as one, it's very similar.
Well, I would say that would be probably an important step forward for us when we're trying to get self-driving cars. Probably having them all communicate with each other would be the safest thing to do. Right. When people are driving right now, right, we don't communicate with each other. It's each of us isolated, looking at all the others around us. We're smart enough that works most of the time, but we have accidents every day. So we're not smart enough to avoid all accidents. And I think self-driving cars will get to the point where even without this connection between all the cars, they'll individually be smart enough to actually outperform humans. But I think that en route to that, it would be perhaps wise to have cars having like a network among them, so that you, in some sense, know all the positions, and you mitigate the possibility of accidents and so forth. Absolutely.
And talk a little bit about this book here, because I think this is my favorite one. How we create
Yes.
what we see. Summarize that a little bit in your words, which are much better than mine.
Yeah. Well,
Let's face it. After a night with drinks, I don't bounce back the next day like I used to. I have to make a choice, either a great night or a great next day. That is, until I found Z-Biotics. We all have busy lives these days and can't afford to waste a day stuck on the couch because of a few drinks the night before. Z-Biotics is the answer we've all been looking for. Z-Biotics pre-alcohol probiotic is the first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. Here's how it works. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. It's this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for your rough next day. Z-Biotics produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. It's designed to work like your liver, but in your gut, where you need it most. Just remember to drink Z-Biotics before drinking alcohol, drink responsibly, and get a good night's of sleep to feel your best tomorrow. Order Z-Biotics now for your summertime barbecue, weddings, vacations, you name it. Go to zbiotics.com/MSCSmedia or scan the QR code on the screen right now to get 15% off your first order when you use MSCS Media checkout. You can also sign up for a subscription using my code, so you can stay prepared no matter the time or occasion. Z-Biotics is backed with a 100% money-back guarantee, so if you're ever unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. Remember, head to zbiotics.com/MSCSmedia, use the code MSCSmedia at checkout for 15% off. Thank you, Z-Biotics, for sponsoring this episode. Growing up, cereal was one of the best parts of being a kid, but as I got older, started working out, I had to watch out for sugar and empty carbs. Magic Spoon has the amazing flavors you'll love, but high protein and less sugar. The variety pack, 4 flavors, cocoa, fruity, frosted, and peanut butter. This pack has 0 grams of sugar, 13 to 14 grams of protein, and 4 to 5 net grams of carbs. Only 140 calories per serving. It's high protein, 0 grams of sugar, keto-friendly, gluten-free, grain-free, and soy-free. The fruity one, I'm done for. I can eat the whole box, no problem. Go to magicspoon.com/MSCS to grab a variety pack and try it today. And be sure to use promo code MSCS at checkout to save $5 off your order. And Magic Spoon is so confident in their product, it's backed with a 100% guarantee. So if you don't like it for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. That says something. Remember, get your next delicious bowl of high-protein cereal at magicspoon.com/MSCS and use the code MSCS to save $5 off. Thank you, Magic Spoon, for sponsoring this episode.
I wrote that book because I realized came out in 1998, and I wrote it because I realized that in the field of vision science, everybody understood that vision is not just seeing what's there. Vision is a construction process. You see the moon? Well, that's because you're creating the moon visually. You're carving your visual world and making a moon there. You see a cat? That's because you're creating the cat. You're creating its shape, the motion, the texture of the fur. You're creating all of that. So everybody who was actually working in computer vision and building computer vision systems knew this. I mean, because if you just put a camera out there, it doesn't see anything. It just gets colors. It doesn't see objects and textures and so forth. So you have to do all that work. But I realized that everybody who's doing the research understands this, and nobody, just my casual friends, had no idea, and they couldn't believe it. So I realized, okay, this is an important point, and it's most people find it extremely difficult. Can I make this idea simple enough that everybody can get what's happening, the revolution that's happening, that's going to make self-driving cars possible? And so that's why I wrote this book. Here's roughly how vision works. This is the computation that's going on in your brain. You have billions of neurons that are doing this. Why all those neurons? Well, it's not easy what you're doing. What you're doing is not trivial. You're constructing your worlds on the fly. And so in visual intelligence, I don't just talk about it. I show you images, lots of images where you can see yourself, you catch yourself in the process of making stuff up. So that's why I wanted to show you're making this all up, but you're making it up in a very useful way. And so that's what the book is about.
And isn't that amazing? 1998, right? And
yes,
and now it comes to life more because I guess because people, you kind of can't deny it at some point if you really get into it, or people got over their ego a little bit.
I guess I just got a quick question. I'm picking up here now. I'm starting to understand a little bit. Okay, so if I have this water bottle right now in front of me, right? Here it is. And I chuck it at Tommy. Okay, I throw it across the room and I hit him in the head with it. He gets hit though, right? You get hit with this. So how does this
because that's my perception. That's what I'm seeing. You're throwing it at me. I think you're throwing it at me. I think, Professor, this is good because then you can correct us to the two peanuts over here. So you throw it at me, right? It hits me.
Boom. Ow.
My computer says, "Oh, you hit me, ow," and that's how I perceive it. Now, can you correct us on that one?
That's right. But I'll give you a metaphor that may help, because a lot of people, this might sound like a lot of philosophy and we could just be making this stuff up and so forth. But here's a metaphor that may help you understand what we're saying. Suppose you're playing Grand Theft Auto, virtual reality, and you have a headset on and you're immersed, and you see in front of you, you see a green Porsche and you're trying to catch up to them. But someone else who's playing notices that there is a red Ferrari behind you, but I don't see it. I don't see the red Ferrari, and the red Ferrari comes up and smashes me from behind. Well, so all of a sudden my car starts spinning and so forth. Well, what's going on there? I didn't see the red Ferrari, and it didn't exist for me. And of course, there's no red Ferrari in the supercomputer, right? There's some supercomputer that's actually running the Grand Theft Auto software. So what's going on is the red Ferrari only exists when someone looks and renders it, right? When you turn your headset and see it, then there's a red Ferrari. But there's no red Ferrari in the computer. The supercomputer has no, if you look inside there, there's no red Ferraris. There's software and there's voltages and there's other stuff. So that's what I'm saying. There is a reality outside of us, and it will affect you even if you don't perceive it. But what you perceive is entirely your construction. Like when I see the red Ferrari, I create the red Ferrari in Grand Theft Auto. And it doesn't exist until I perceive it. A lot of people say to me, yeah, Don, well, you think we're making this all stuff up, but if you get hit from behind by a car and you didn't see it, it'll still kill you. Well, yeah, but that doesn't mean the car existed. It means there's some reality, but we only interpret that reality as a car. That's not the nature of the reality. It's far more complicated than that.
Yeah, I get that.
Go to the next book.
Oh, 1 second.
That's for our next slide. Yeah. Now, the formal theory of perception. Professor, could you elaborate on this too? It's just amazing. 9814, and now it's like modern as can be.
Yeah. Now, this is not an easy book. This is 300 pages of mathematics. So this is this came out in 1989.
Holy shit!
So this is. Yeah, this is published. So Bruce Bennett is the first author. He was an algebraic geometer, a professor of mathematics, algebraic geometry, and Chetan Prakash is a mathematical physicist. And I'm a flunky. I was the flunky in the group. I was the vision scientist, and what we were doing was giving a theory back then in which consciousness is fundamental. We were trying to show that you could get a mathematical model in which consciousness is fundamental and gives rise to space and time. so that space and time are not the fundamental reality. They're just our headset. They're just a user interface, and that consciousness is the fundamental thing. And I'm still working. I'm working right now on theories of consciousness that are offspring of the mathematics in that book.
So what I wondered was, it could be a little bit off. So they say we only use 10% of our brain. Would it be possible that other 90% is being used to create this interface? Because what else in the body doesn't get used? Most things in the body, there's a purpose, there's a reason. Why would we only use 10% of our brain or whatever it may be? What, the other 90% is just hanging out?
Well, that's a great question, because lots of people think that they think that we're only using a small fraction of our brain, and that actual question, which was a quite popular question, actually misunderstands how the brain works. Right? When you think about how the brain works, it's really important not only what is active, but what's not active. Like in a computer system, if you think about it, when you're computing something, you don't want all the registers to be active at once. That would just be chaos. What you want is very selective parts at different times doing their little thing. If everything's active at once, then the whole thing falls apart. So you can see that even if you find that when I do like an EEG, electroencephalogram of someone's brain to see the brain waves and so forth, you'll find that you don't want overactivity. You'll end up having convulsions. you'll pass out. So you really want there's a lot of the brain that's in neurotransmitters that are there to inhibit activity. So because you don't want the thing to blow up, and go chaotic. So really the way to think about it, but the second part of your question is spot on. There's a lot going on in the brain that you're not aware of, and it's doing tons and tons of stuff that you just take for granted that's incredibly sophisticated. So in some sense, your brain is working to 100% of the capacity in the way it's supposed to be working. Most people's brains are working 100% capacity the way they're supposed to be working, which means that some parts are quiet because they need to be quiet now for what you're doing now. So you can see it's a little tricky.
Right. So what you're saying is, in a sense, when they say that 10%, when they do that scan, maybe at that particular point, it's only using a 10% that it needs to use at that particular time. Like if we're on a computer and we're using Final Cut or Adobe, say we're running 10 different things at once, the fan goes on. So at that time, if we did a scan, it might be 80%. But if we're just laying there, it might be 10%.
That's right. And if you actually tried to run too many programs in the computer all at once, the thing might just collapse. And that's what we don't. So the brain is very, very, in some sense, the trick with the brain is to be complicated enough to do these really important computations, but don't go over the edge and just go into complete chaos and overload. And so we're always on a fine edge there, actually.
I did my own little case study. So I went through, because I knew you were coming on. I remember I emailed you maybe a month ago about it. Yes. So I tried in my citizen terms over here how to explain things, and the ones that people that I had talked to that had more of an open mind, maybe just thought similar to the way I do, the same question always arises. What about pain?
Yes.
I would go through, which I want to go through slowly with you, space, time, how consciousness and space, fundamentally how that exists and doesn't exist. But even after I gave my spiel that somehow they kind of understood, the same question out of 36 out of 100, which means 36 out of 50 probably were listening, was, well, what about pain? So if you're in that interface and you feel pain, how do you explain that one, Tommy? Yeah.
Right. The implication is, maybe I'm making up three-dimensional space. I'm making that, but I'm not making up pain. That's real, and it's right there. I mean, if you have a pain in your hand, if a snake is bitten your hand and it hurts, that's because there's a real hand with a real snake bite in it, and it really does hurt. And so that seems to be, put the lie to everything I'm saying. Well, there's an interesting phenomenon called phantom limb. So there are unfortunate people who have, for example, in an accident, lost an entire arm.
Yeah.
And what's remarkable is that most of those people still feel that they have an arm. It's called a phantom limb. So they will tell you that, yeah, I feel like I have an arm. And one of the most terrible things that these people suffer is phantom limb pain. For example, there was one guy who felt like his phantom limb, his arm was gone, but he felt like his arm was like this. His phantom arm was like this, all tightened up, and he had muscle cramp because his arm, so he had like a Charlie horse, a cramp in his muscle and couldn't get rid of it. And there's nothing to do. I mean, you can't, like, if you have a real Charlie horse in your arm, right, you can stretch your arm out
or wait,
but there's nothing to stretch. And so it turns out that suicide is a serious issue for these people because they're having pain. Where's the pain? They'll point to empty space. It's right there in empty space. That's where the pain is. Well, there's nothing there. Well, clearly, you're making that up. You're making up the pain. And a friend of mine, a brilliant a cognitive scientist and medical doctor, V.S. Ramachandran, we call him, his friends call him Rama. He's a professor at UC San Diego. Actually figured out a way to help these people. He would take a person, he set up a set of mirrors in a box so that when you could put suppose you have a missing left arm, but you have a right arm. So you could stick your right arm in this box and it would look like you had a left arm. So you would see a left arm. Then he said, now I want you to pretend like you're conducting an orchestra where you're sort of, at least at my level of orchestration, they're just going like this, right? I'm sure a real one is better. But it worked for these people because they got the visual input. I mean, they were trying to move their left hand, but there is no left hand. But they got the visual input that it was working. And so all of a sudden, it sort of connected them to their phantom, and they were able to get rid of the phantom and the phantom pain. So it actually worked to get rid of the cramping in this one poor guy's arm. And so when it worked, he begged Rama if he could take the device home, and it was just a box with some mirrors. It was pretty cheap, so he said, sure, take it home. And so he worked on it for a couple of weeks. And Rama says that the guy got back to him, I think, a couple of weeks later and said, you won't believe what happened. I mean, I continued to do this and it really helped. But then today I woke up and I don't have a phantom arm anymore. It's all gone.
Isn't that amazing?
So the pain thing is also something that you make up. And so now I'll take it to the next step. You make up your whole body. I talked a minute ago about having a real arm as opposed to a phantom. That was just a figure of speech. What I really believe is your body itself is something that you construct on the fly, and it only exists when you look and when you perceive it.
What happens though? Okay, I'm born blind. I have no sight from birth, and so I don't know what things are. Like you could say the sun, and I don't know what the sun is because I can't visually see it. But man, is it fucking hot, that sun. It's beating down on me. I can feel the heat, but I don't know what it looks like. I don't know. How does that work when you're blind?
Right. Well, it turns out that heat itself, the experience of heat, happens in these phantom arms. So you can have the sense of hot and cold in the phantom arms. And so again, it doesn't matter whether you see because the arm isn't even there. So you can look there and there's nothing there and you're feeling. So where does it feel hot? Well, you point to empty space. It feels hot right there on my phantom hand right there. And Rama did this other wonderful experiment where it turns out that there are some maps on the stump. It turns out you can stimulate certain parts of the stump in many people and also on their face, and you will get a feeling of sensation in empty space on the phantom arm. And so what Rama did was he found a map on the face and a map on the stump of the arm, and he found a place where it was like it was your middle finger. And so then he said, okay, I'll make the middle finger cold on the face and I'll make it hot on the arm. And what will the person feel? And what the person feels is they say, "Oh, it feels cold. Oh, now it feels hot," and it would flip back and forth, like the cube that you saw. Sometimes you see it one way, then it flips and goes the other way.
Mhm.
So with the hot and cold, it'll go hot and then it'll flip to cold. So once again, you see that we're making up even the experience of hot and cold, of heat.
I was just going to say, and to make clear, we're talking about a middle finger that doesn't exist. It's gone.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
like, it's hard because you're not here, which too bad you're not flown in here. It'd be a lot easier to do this. But, my arm's here and it's cut off. Let's just say it got chopped off. Some girl that hates me. And now I have no arm. But you pinch here and I can feel it on a finger I don't have. Just to make it very simple and clear.
Right.
Which then goes back to where we started of this interface.
Exactly right. That you're creating all this stuff on the fly as you need. One fun example of this, again, I think that Rama has, is that he was using a Q-tip with a little bit of water to experience the hot and cold. So he touched the map on the face, and he wanted to see what does it feel like on your arm. So he touched, and he was getting the map of okay, this part corresponds to the thumb, that part corresponds to the middle finger, that's the forearm, and so forth. So he's getting a map. But at one point, he put some Q-tip with like cold water on it, and the water started dripping down the face. And the guy said, "Oh, I can feel the water," and he said, he just pointing, there it goes through empty space. It's dripping down my phantom arm. And so once again, you're making all this stuff up. But it's not just when the arm is cut off. Even when you have, quote unquote, a real arm, what you're doing is you're making it all up on the fly. You have a hand when you look, and when you don't look, you don't have a hand.
And when we say empty space, we're meaning something that isn't there. And I just say this because my people that watch are from 18, the gender thing is from 18 to 60. So when we say empty space, it's not there. That's what we're referring to, right?
Exactly right. If you look there, there's nothing there. The person is pointing to nothing and saying, that's where I feel it on my hand. Or right there is where I have a cramp. And it's so bad that I'm feeling like committing suicide, and there's nothing there. They're pointing to nothing. And that's what's hurting them.
So then the next thing that is always a popular thing, and I thought deja vu. And I've heard you speak many times on that. I think you did it at a TED Talk. You even brought it up. I could be wrong. One of your talks. Okay. And I always go back and forth with this, but I'm with this. I'm with the interface. But for a minute there, I was with. I was really into I forget which astrophysicist. It doesn't matter. The dimension thing. So I thought, and maybe I'm wrong. I want you to tell me. So I thought when I go to beach that I was never at, and I can smell the sand, the ocean, everything else. I had thought that a frequency from another dimension had crossed at the wrong time at the wrong place, and that's why I thought I was there. That's why I could smell what I could smell. Another example is I'm thinking of Rob, and then Rob calls me. But then when I look further into your writings and everything else, it seems more to me like the deja vu part, at least, where I think I was somewhere I'm not, or I think I've eaten that before, but I didn't. It goes back to the interface like a computer where it's just a glitch. Like when they put out betas, beta 1, 2, 3, 4, there's always glitches. So the brain would be no different in that aspect. So when I have deja vu, the brain's just making me think I was there because it's just a wire crossed.
That's right. So when people have these kinds of experiences, there are different kinds of explanations you might want to try to give. There's something supernatural beyond what we know. And I don't want to dismiss those, but as a scientist, I always try to go with the simplest explanation, the most likely explanation. And the one you gave is more likely that basically, if you think about you're constructing everything that you see, and you're fallible in the process, then yeah, you're going to make mistakes every once in a while, and that's more likely. Now, I'm not saying that things beyond space-time aren't possible and so forth, but I'm just saying we should try out the more routine explanations first before we go to the more exotic explanations.
But what do you think? Do you think it's just the wire crossed at this point?
I think most of them probably are, but there could be a small. I don't dismiss the possibility that there could be some genuine, because I don't think space-time is fundamental.
Right.
I think that there's a reality far beyond space-time, and space-time is a very simple projection of a much deeper reality. But on the other hand, I think that projection itself is fairly systematic, and so what we don't really need to think about things beyond space-time and beyond current physics. We don't really need to have mysteries that are unexplainable. We could have theories that are systematic beyond space-time. So even there, I'm going to suspect that the reality beyond space-time normally affects us the way we perceive right now. That's the way it affects us. We don't need to say that something really weird is going on. So
this episode is sponsored by Blue Chew. Let's talk about sex. Guys, remember the days when you're always ready to go? Now you can increase your performance and get that extra confidence in bed. Listen up, BlueChew.com. Blue Chew is a unique online service that delivers the same active ingredients as Viagra, Cialis, and Levitra, but in chewable tablets at a fraction of the cost. You can take them anytime, day or night, so you can plan ahead or be ready whenever the opportunity arises. The process is simple. Sign up at BlueChew.com, consult with one of their licensed medical providers, and once you're approved, you'll receive your prescription within days. The best part? It's all done online. So no visits to the doctor's office, awkward conversations, waiting in line at the pharmacy. Blue Chew's tablets are made in the USA and prepared and shipped direct to your door in a discreet package. Does it work? Don't think you need it? Try it free for a month and see. You're going to love it. You could be missing the best sex of your life. They say there's nothing sexier than confidence, and Blue Chew can help give you the confidence where it counts. Blue Chew wants to help you have better sex. Discover your options at BlueChew.com. Chew it and do it. And we've got a special deal for our listeners. Try Blue Chew free when you use the promo code MSCS at checkout. Just pay $5 shipping. That's BlueChew.com. Promo code MSCS to receive your first month free. Visit BlueChew.com for more details and important safety information. We thank Blue Chew for sponsoring the podcast. This episode is brought to you by Let's Get Checked. Are you the man your father was? Recent studies have shown that men's testosterone levels have dropped substantially since the 1980s at about an average of 1% per year. Think about how old your father was when he was born. For example, if he was 30, your testosterone levels could be 30% lower than his. Low testosterone levels can have all types of health effects on men. It can affect your mood, sex drive, memory, muscle mass loss, you name it. And yes, low testosterone is more common the older you get, but it can affect men at any age. So let's talk about today's sponsor, Let's Get Checked. You can order a testing kit that will be delivered to you in a discreet packaging with next-day delivery. Once your sample arrives in the laboratory, confidential results will be available from your secure online account within 2 to 5 days. So, if you want to test your hormone levels without having to leave your home, visit trylgc.com/MSCS Media and get 25% off your test using the code MSCS Media. The link is in the description at the top. And then another thing is the space-time and the consciousness, right? And that's something big that you're on. And how could if our consciousness is creating these things, wouldn't the conscience have to be there before the space-time? It would have to be, right? Because you would have to be able to project in space-time. Or do I have that backwards?
Well, I would agree with you, but I think most of my colleagues and most physicists would disagree, right? So I'll try to sort this out. Most of my colleagues in the neurosciences, I would say 95 to 99% of them who are studying consciousness would absolutely say that consciousness is produced by the brain or by sufficiently complex systems that have the right programming of some kind, the right functional properties. I would say 99% of my colleagues are of that. I mean, these are good friends, and they smile at me, but that's what they're doing now. That's the standard view, but I think that it won't work. And it hasn't worked so far. So one of the things that when I'm at conferences, I'm with my friends on stage, and they have theories like, for example, Stuart Hameroff and Roger Penrose have the theory that the neuronal microtubules have these special quantum states. And if you have the right orchestrated collapse of these quantum states of neuronal microtubules, that somehow gives rise to conscious experience. And
that's what
so,
Carson was talking about.
I'll say to Stuart, I have on stage, so Stuart, great, give me one. So what is the orchestrated collapse of my quantum states of neuronal microtubules? That must be the taste of chocolate, or that must be the smell of vanilla, or whatever it might be, whatever you want. Can you give me one? I just want one example where you say that orchestrated collapse must be that experience. And they can't give a single one. And you can do that for every single person, every single theory, and say, okay, integrated information theory. Okay, great. What Q shape, what integrated information pattern must be, again, the smell of violet perfume or whatever. And they can't give you a single one, not one.
And Professor, not to interrupt you, but could you, like I know from reading, but I won't say it right. Can you explain that again, how they can't prove that in a simple way, the simplest way possible?
Well, when I just ask them, they'll say, okay, here's this mathematics. Mm-hmm. I want like the orchestrated collapse. This is what causes consciousness, or integrated information. This pattern of this is what causes consciousness. I say, oh, really? That's your theory? Okay, interesting. So, well, give me one. So what is the pattern that must be, the taste of a taco, or hot sauce or salt? Just I mean, we're doing science here. You're trying to explain stuff. What can you explain? It turns out, no specific conscious experience at all. They cannot explain one specific conscious experience. And this has led Steven Pinker, who's a brilliant cognitive scientist and linguist, and he has a book called Enlightenment Now. It came out in, I think, 2018. And in that book, he notes what I've just said, that they're not getting any specific conscious experiences. And he says, we may just have to stipulate it. The step where we go from here's this pattern of brain activity to here's the conscious experience, we may just have to stipulate that. And hats off to Pinker. He's facing the fact that we've utterly failed to go from one and have it explain the other. And so my attitude is, the reason they're failing is that it's false. Brains do not create our experiences. In fact, our experiences create space and time and things that we call brains. And ultimately, my colleagues will have to change how they're doing their study of consciousness and take consciousness as more fundamental than space-time. Now, in that sense, what you were saying in your question makes a lot of sense. Think about, again, the metaverse and you putting on a headset and being immersed again in Grand Theft Auto. Well, you have an avatar in Grand Theft Auto, right? You can see your avatar, you can see your hands on the steering wheel and so forth, and others can see Are you your avatar? No. The avatar is something that you see in you. Where do you see it? In your experience. You experience that avatar. But the avatar, when you look away from your hands, you're looking over out the window and you no longer see your hands on the steering wheel, you don't have hands, right? In the metaverse, you have no hands until you look back and see them and render them. Then you have hands. I'm saying that what's true in the metaverse, which is what you were saying, is like, so it must be that this is all in our consciousness. Absolutely. And the metaverse really helps you to see it. When I look out the window, I'm not rendering hands of my avatar, and therefore I don't have avatar hands. They don't exist. But when I do look, then I render them, and there they are. And I'm saying the same thing is true right now of your body and your brain. It's there when so right now, I have no brain. And a lot of my colleagues might heartily agree. Yeah, Hoffman has no brain. Saying here, he has no brain. But I'm saying, so Hoffman has no brain. But if you actually did a scan, in the moment of doing the scan, you would image neurons, and therefore they would exist because you're rendering them. Just like in the metaverse, when you look, you render. When you don't look, you don't render, and it's not there. So neurons are there when you render them, and otherwise they're not there. So we have it backwards. We've assumed that the neurons are there and they render our conscious experiences, and it's the other way around. And you mentioned the issue of space-time. Physicists, of course, this is their area, and you might say, well, look, Hoffman's just some cognitive scientist. This is not his domain. Space-time, that's the turf of physicists, and surely they will put this cognitive scientist in his place. But I'm actually following the high energy theoretical physicists. They're the ones that are saying, based on quantum field theory and gravity, space-time is doomed. Space-time, which we've assumed is fundamental since Einstein, and before that, space and time. With Newton, we assumed space and time separately were fundamental. That whole framework, they say, is doomed. And I mean, so who is saying this? Like David Gross, who won the Nobel Prize for his work on the strong force.
Oh, yeah.
Nimar Kani-Hamed, who's at the Institute for Advanced Study at Princeton. Andrew Strominger.
Strominger, yeah.
Strominger, yeah, he's
yeah,
a brilliant guy. Yeah, so, and there's several others. Ed Witten has said this, and Nathan Seiberg. So, I mean, but most physicists, by the way, don't understand this. This is a particular small branch called high energy theoretical physics. These are the guys that are looking at the very highest energies, where you're probing the smallest and smallest parts of space-time. And there you realize space-time ceases to even have any meaning at 10 to the minus 33 centimeters, what they call the Planck scale. Space-time actually has no operational meaning. And so this is the small branch of physics, high energy theoretical physics, where you're faced every day with this limit of space-time, and you realize, oh, this space-time, which we have always assumed is the fundamental reality, is just a construct. It's just a perceptual and, in this case, theoretical construct. And they're looking for new, deeper mathematics beyond space-time. So they're not looking for necessarily like structures that are curled up inside space-time, like in string theory, right? There are all these little hidden dimensions. They're looking for structures utterly beyond space-time, outside of space-time. And people go, how could anything possibly be outside space-time? Space-time is all there is. And the answer is now I'm not going to blame the physicist for what I'm about to say. So now this is just Hoffman saying his own stuff. Space-time is just our headset. If you've worn a headset all the time, it's hard. It's easy to see why you would think that's all there is. Until someone comes, Hoffman, I'm going to take the headset off, and go, whoa, yeah. I'm no longer in Grand Theft Auto. What is this around me? So that's in the sense that what I'm saying, now I'm going back to the physicists. Now, so I don't blame them for what I just said, but now I'll go back to what they're saying. The physicists are saying there are these structures, like something called decorated permutations, that are beyond space-time, something called the amplituhedron and cosmological there are these structures that are utterly and completely outside of space-time. They're beyond space-time, and they're beyond quantum theory. So this is not just saying that we'll use quantum theory to create space-time, which many physicists are trying to do. They're saying the whole ball of wax, space-time and quantum theory, emerges from something entirely outside of it, deeper. And there is no quantum theory. There are no what they call Hilbert spaces there. So you can't have any quantum theory there.
I think you're starting to get to Michi. I think you're starting to get to Michi. You know, Cuckoo, I can never say his last name right. Cuckoo. Yeah. You know, I call him Cuckoo and he laughs at me.
Yeah, I don't know how to say it.
Michio.
Michio. Oh yeah.
Yeah, string theory. Yeah.
The very famous physicist. Right?
Yeah, he goes like this when I say his name wrong. But I think you're getting to him. I think you're getting to him a little bit with the string theory.
Yeah, I suspect that he would disagree with me quite a bit. I mean, I think he likes the string theory, right?
Breaking a tiny bit. Yeah, well, he loves the string theory. Yeah, and you know, it's sad because not just him, and you know, he's a great guy, and the rest of them. But it's almost like some of these physicists, not all, and for whatever reason, they write down something or they come up with something or they combine something together, they put it on paper, and this is it, period. We're not changing it. This is it. Even if whoever walks in the door and says, no, it's wrong. No, this is right. And when you have that, it's tough to progress.
Right. And I think that a physicist is in this interesting position. I think most physicists aren't that dogmatic, right? But when they're trying to, when people who are not physicists come in and have their idea about how it really works,
yeah,
it's again like someone with a pair of binoculars trying to tell someone with the James Webb Telescope what's really out there. You might be smarter than all the professionals. You may be more, but you don't have a chance. If you don't know all this, you just don't have a chance. So most physicists, I would say, understand and are very explicit that what we call the standard model of physics. First, it's a brilliant accomplishment, and it's been thousands and thousands of researchers, untold hours of experiment and theory, the most brilliant minds working on it. It's an incredible accomplishment. Hats off. It's one of the greatest things humanity's ever done is the standard model of physics. And yet the real pros will tell you it's not the final word. And they will tell you all the problems that we need to deal with on the standard model. So the real pros they know, right? We for example, we have to put the masses in by hand. Well, gee, we would like a deeper theory where we don't have to put the masses in by hand and some other parameters. So the real most genuine scientists would admit that we'll never get a theory of everything. When we talk about a theory of everything, it's with a wink and a nod.
Mm-hmm.
It's a theory of everything that we've been able to experiment and theorize about so far. But I think most would really say that when you look back at the history of science and human thought, we are dogmatic. We thought the Earth was flat.
Mm-hmm.
We thought when we let go of that, it was hard, but we let go of it. Then we thought the Earth, even though it was round, is the center of the universe. And we killed people over that. Right? We burned people at the stake over that, right? We're talking about dogmatic. That's so there is that tendency to be dogmatic within the human mind. The thing about science and mathematics is a good scientific theory is great partly because the mathematics tells you the limits of your theory. Like Einstein's mathematics,
Mm-hmm.
Relativity theory, together with quantum field theory, which they're both based on spacetime. Both assume spacetime is the fundamental starting point.
Base. Yeah.
And then they come back and the mathematics tells you that foundation breaks, is no longer functional. No hand weight. 10 to the minus 33 centimeters, 10 to the minus 43 seconds, it's all over for spacetime. There's no functional meaning to it. Time to look for a deeper framework. Now, that is the antidote to dogmatism. So the best scientists understand that what we have is the best theory of everything that we know so far. So that's our theory of everything is the theory of everything that we know so far. But of course, the next generation, we don't want to look like fools to the next generation.
Yeah.
They thought they knew it all. Look at those stupid dudes back in 2023. They thought no. In 1890, there were some physicists who were telling bright students not to go into physics because they thought it was pretty much done. Well, we look back and we realized that in some sense, the biggest discoveries hadn't been made. We didn't know about relativity theory, special and general relativity. We didn't know about quantum theory. They only knew Newton. So we look back and we realize, how could they possibly have been so dumb? Well, we don't want to make the same mistake. So our standard model of quantum, of physics, the standard model of physics, string theory, whatever we have right now, is just our best theory that we have so far. And we'd be fools to think that this is the end. And that would also stymie any creative research, right? We should assume that we've missed big stuff. We should just assume that and be looking for it And the best scientists, of course, usually what happens though is I think it was Max Planck who said, science progresses one funeral at a time.
One guy gets
Right?
out of the way.
So what happens is that the old guys keep their theories until they die, and it's the next generation. But so science as a social institution is not dogmatic, but the old guys die with their theories.
Yes, they do, and that's with everything too.
Yeah.
But without Einstein, you wouldn't be if you didn't have that work, you wouldn't be able to take it and prove it right or wrong. You know what I mean? So I mean, it's other way. But what always catches me is when they say, or like you say a lot, is that space-time was prior to consciousness. And I just like to lay the base simple. You have to have consciousness to create the space-time. Because with the consciousness is what's creating the space-time in this interface. So with that sentence right there, it's dead.
That's the proposal. Now, again, I want to be very clear that that's not the standard belief among cognitive neuroscientists or among physicists, right? That's not the standard belief. That's far from the standard belief. But I'm proposing that that's where we're going to have to go.
Well, no one has been able to prove you wrong with anything yet.
And I'm having fun discussions. I'll be having a fun discussion with several physicists in just another couple of months, about this kind of thing. So
now, when it comes to physics and evolution and space-time and all that, I look at it like, and this could be completely off. You have the pyramids. These big pyramids all over the place. Now, that creates a building block of history. You have this that happened. You have this. So now in this interface, you have all these interesting things that create a story. A story of how we became, what happened before, the dinosaurs, so on and so forth. How does that all mix in with space-time, evolution, physics, and the fact that it's not fundamental when referring to space-time? And that would be, again, because you would need that consciousness to project however many years ago in the interface that there was dinosaurs, that there was these big, huge pyramids that we think we see. But are they really there? Like, is there really 90 of them there? Are they really there? Or is that just part of the history that we've built in our interface so that things make more sense?
Right. So, of course, the pyramids exist when you render them, and they don't exist until then. So think again, the metaverse. When you look, you see the red Ferrari, and when you don't look, it's not there because you're not rendering it. But when we look, what makes sense is a story in which there's this history of time, in which there were Egyptians, thousands of them.
You say it so much better than me. That's what I meant. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, it's a great question, and so we make it just seems obvious that we should talk about something that happened several thousand years ago, and some pharaoh getting thousands of his people to cut these stones and move them, and all this hard work, and that's why we see this. And so the question really is, what about this whole thing of time? And you're saying space-time isn't fundamental, but boy, time sure does seem fundamental. And are you saying that we're just making all this up? Well, it turns out when you do this mathematical model of consciousness that I'm working on. So we have my colleague Chetan Prakash and others that I've been working with.
Prakash is a monster. He's a monster.
Prakash is a mathematical. He's a heavyweight. Mathematical heavyweight.
He's like Mike Tyson of math.
Yeah. Without Chetan, I wouldn't have the mathematical power to do this stuff at all. So it's a wonderful collaboration that we've been collaborating for around 35 years.
Wow! Congratulations.
Yeah, he was an author on that book from 1989, so it's been a while. So on the mathematics that we're doing now of consciousness. So we're not just saying that there's consciousness beyond space-time. We're proposing a mathematical model, and of course we're not right. We're just getting the next model, and we'll try to find out its limits. So in this model, it's something called a Markovian dynamics, and it turns out we can make a dynamics of consciousness consciousness, that doesn't have an arrow of time. So it's dynamical, but the so-called entropy, the thing, entropy is like everything runs down. Like, so everybody's probably heard about the second law of thermodynamics, that things fall apart, right?
Right.
If you unplug your refrigerator, it gets warm. So you have to put in energy to keep it cold because it's colder than the surrounding. So, and if you have a hot cup of coffee, it gets cold, and so forth. So that's entropy. And so time, as we think about time, is intimately connected in space-time with entropy. They're deeply connected. Well, it turns out we can do a dynamics of consciousness in which there is no entropic time. But it's a theorem. It's a very simple theorem that if you take this big dynamics and you project it onto a smaller dynamics, so it's a big dynamics, and you're seeing a smaller projection of it, a smaller version of it by conditional probability. It's a theorem that the smaller dynamics that you see will necessarily have an arrow of time as an artifact of the fact that you lost information. So what I'm saying then is our space-time is just our headset. It's a projection of a deeper dynamics in which there is no time. We perceive a time, but that time that we perceive is not an insight into reality. It's entirely an artifact of partial information. It's the fact that we have partial information that forces us to see an arrow of time and to see things falling apart. So that's the deeper story. So there's a deeper framework in which space and time are not fundamental and in which there is no entropic arrow of time. But when we put on a headset that loses information, we necessarily see an arrow of time. And by the way, that then leads to evolution by natural selection. So I think I've done a lot of work on evolution by natural selection and showing that if you take evolution on its own terms and use evolutionary game theory to ask, are we seeing the truth? Or, I see space and time and physical objects. What's the probability on evolutionary grounds that we would evolve to see the truth or some aspects of the truth?
Isn't that game theory a headache for you? That's got to be a headache. Because there's so many different, just from my perspective and the studies I've done, there's 10,000 different ways you could describe game theory. And a funny thing is Metaverse actually put that in their policy. There's a paragraph about game theory. I couldn't wait to tell you that. They really did, yeah.
Yeah, very, very interesting. Well, game theory is a very serious branch of mathematics. It's not all fun and games. It's tough mathematics. John Maynard Smith in the 1970s was the mathematician who basically used the mathematics of game theory and Darwin's ideas to create what we call evolutionary game theory. And those are the tools that Chetan and I and some others, Justin Mark and Brian Merriam, some graduate students that work with us, and others have worked on. And what we showed was the probability is zero, according to evolution of natural selection. The probability is zero, precisely zero, that any organism has ever had any sensory system, vision, touch, taste, or smell, that has ever given them any hint of the true nature of objective reality. Probability is zero, according to evolution of natural selection.
And real quick, explain game theory one more time. Just explain that one more time so everybody listening or watching can understand.
Right. So game theory is very much like, think about a game that you're playing with someone else, right? If you're playing a game and you're trying to win, well, there's rules of the game, and so you can have different strategies. If I take this strategy, like in Grand Theft Auto, maybe what I'm trying to do is ram your car from behind, or maybe I try to shoot your tire out. There's different strategies that you can take, and so different people with different strategies will, and you see which strategy wins, and sometimes a strategy will, maybe shooting out the tires will work against some other strategies, but it won't work against others, right? So one strategy may not be the end all and be all, and it works sometimes, and then someone else gets a strategy that takes you down. So evolution is a game in the following sense: you have all these organisms that are competing to get food, for example, and to reproduce. And so the question is, in evolution, the way you win the game is having more kids. having more offspring. That's how you win. You stay alive long enough to have more kids. That instead of you don't go to the next level, your kids go to the next level of the game, right? So that's the sense in which you can think about evolutionary game theory. So for example, I might have a strategy for having offspring where, like, I'm a human being and I only have one or two kids, but I give them a lot of attention and a lot of care, and I try to just bring one or two kids to maturity so they'll be able to have kids. Or I could be like a spider, and a spider might have, I might have, several hundred kids, and I might eat a few of them because I'm hungry. So I eat a few of my kids, and I just throw them out to the wind. But my strategy is, I have my kids, I eat a few of them, I leave them, I abandon them, but I had so many of them that it'll work. There'll be some of them that survive. The ones I didn't eat, that my friends didn't eat, then the other things didn't eat, they'll survive, they'll grow up. So you can see there's completely different strategies. And so evolutionary game theory is saying,
excellent job, by the way. Excellent
interact
job.
and what works. Right?
Excellent job of explaining that.
And so it's all mathematics. And so we can use that mathematics to ask the technical question: what is the probability that any sensory system, vision, touch, smell, whatever, of any organism, humans, snakes, spiders, whatever, has ever been shaped to see any aspect of the truth of objective reality? That's the question we asked. And the answer is zero, precisely zero. In other words, evolution tells us what you're seeing is a headset. It's just a headset. None of it's the truth. Evolution shapes sensory systems to keep you alive long enough to reproduce. Period. Not to see the truth. In other words, from the game theoretic point of view, like Grand Theft Auto, you've got a headset that tells you what you need to know to win the game, or to play the game, at least. You don't need to know about the diodes and resistors in the software in the supercomputer that's running the game, right? If you had to toggle voltages in the supercomputer to play Grand Theft Auto, you would lose against someone who didn't know about that and was just turning a steering wheel and pushing on the gas.
Right.
You would lose. And that's what evolution has done. You don't need to know about the nuts and bolts about reality. Forget about it. You need to have steering wheels and gas pedals to play the game of life. And so you're not going to see the truth. You've got a headset. And so it's a theorem of evolution by natural selection that's the case. But evolution doesn't tell you what's outside the headset. It can't tell you. It can just tell you what you're seeing is a headset. So you have to now take this big step. And so we're saying, okay, evolution said it's a headset. It's just a headset. We're going to propose that there is this realm of conscious agents outside, and we have to then show how the headset arises as a special case. Well, this theorem is one aspect of it, right? We have this dynamics of conscious agents in which there is no arrow of time. But when you take any projection of it, any headset view, you get an arrow of time. And so time, now go back to evolution, time is the fundamental limited resource, right? If you don't get your food in time, you die. If you don't mate in time, you don't have offspring. If I don't get my drink of water in time, I die of thirst. If I don't get my next breath of air in time, I'm dead. So time is the deepest and most fun, and time is an illusion.
Mm-hmm.
Time is an artifact of limited information, and so are all the other limited resources. And so is the whole thing about competition itself may be an artifact of the projection and not a deep insight into our true nature. So this is the way science works, is evolution by natural selection is a beautiful theory, and it's so beautiful and so powerful, it tells you its limits. It says the very concepts of this theory of physical organisms in space and time competing for physical resources like food and water and mates in space and time, that very framework is not fundamental. It's just a headset. It's precise enough to tell you that this theory itself is at best a headset, but it can't tell you what's beyond. And that's what's good about scientific theories, is they're mathematically precise and they tell you their limits. Every theory, every scientific theory has a limit. There is no scientific theory of everything. The only question is, have we actually gotten smart enough yet to figure out the limits of this theory? If we haven't found the limits, that means we're not clever enough, we're not smart enough, or the theory itself is not good enough to tell us what its limits are, in which case we need a better theory. But every scientific theory is just, well, every theory has its own assumptions, right? Every theory says, if you let me assume this, like Einstein, he said, let's assume that there's something that we'll call space and time. And let's assume that the speed of light is the same for all viewers in time, in space. So the speed of light is always the same. So we're going to make that assumption. And we're going to assume that the laws of physics are always the same if you're always moving at a constant speed. So it said, if you grant me all those assumptions, then all this miraculous stuff comes out. The whole theory of special relativity, later general relativity, comes out from a few assumptions. But the assumptions are so precise that later on we can say, now using those assumptions, we realize that the very notion of space and time itself falls apart at 10 to the minus 33 centimeters. Mm-hmm. That's a beautiful theory where a genius takes his or her ideas, makes them mathematically precise, and then finds the limits. First, the power. I mean, GPS is based on, needs Einstein's theory of gravity. Without Einstein's theory of gravity, we couldn't have GPS. So it has incredible power and scope, but it also necessarily will have its own limits. So every scientific theory that's a good theory, most theories are bogus, but there's a very, very small number of theories that are great, but they're always going to have their own limits. And those theories will tell us something new that will often give us new technology and make our lives better, or in the case of nuclear bombs, more dangerous. But eventually a good theory will tell you its limits. And this is the antidote for dogmatism. Right. And this is, by the way, where I'm very interested in science and spirituality interacting, right? Because spirituality has been saying for a long time, space and time is not fundamental.
Yeah, all the way back.
Consciousness of some kind is, right? Consciousness of some kind is fundamental, but they haven't had the mathematical precision that science has. And so it's very easy for someone to have a deep insight and to say these things, and then for the followers to turn it into a religion and a dogmatism. And then you end up fighting and so forth. Right. And the language of the spiritual traditions is not precise enough for you to find out what the limits of your concepts are. And so that's why I'm really excited going forward to have science and spirituality interact. I think there are many insights in the spiritual traditions, and there's probably a lot of stuff that's bogus, just like in science. A lot of insights and a lot of stuff that turns out to be bogus, and that we transcend. The only question is, can we bring the beautiful precision that we get in mathematics, in science, to the questions in spirituality? Not that we're going to get the final word. Again, we never get the final theory of everything, but at least we get theories where we understand the limits of our theories. Spiritual traditions will say, our words are just pointers. Don't look at the finger that's pointing. Look to where it's pointing. So the good traditions will say that. Don't take these words too literally. But it's easier when the theory itself says, this theory falls apart at 10 to the minus 33 centimeters for you to go, okay, yeah, that theory isn't the final word because it falls apart at 10 to the minus 33 centimeters. Okay, I need to look for something deeper. That's what I want in the spiritual traditions, where we literally we understand spiritual things in a more precise way. Not that we can finally package them into a little package and say, that's the final word about it. No, that misses the whole point. Is to say, here's our best description so far, and here are the limits of that description. Now, what can we do for our next step?
Right, and then pass it or keep working on it until you do pass it. But that makes total sense. So when it comes to the evolution, in my opinion, you have to be right, because you build this framework in the interface. And in that framework in the interface, your whole objective, if you think about before all this materialistic nutty stuff has happened, the only purpose in life was to reproduce. Whether you're human right? Whether you're an ant, whether you're, I can never remember that animal that they put them out here in Florida, and just a little bit off topic, but they put wolves wherever this, was it a fucking coyote?
Yeah, I don't
It's
know.
driving me crazy. It was some type of animal that had babies. So they put these wolves, they released these wolves, and the animal would have 4 pups at a time. But when the wolves were released, they kept eating the pups. So the mom would have 20 at a clip.
Yeah.
And now they're all over the place. Just
Wow.
by evolution, right? So going back to what you're saying, reproduction is the whole thing, but that's in the interface. And if it has a limit, then you're not breaking out of the interface that we're in, right? If there's a limit, we're not breaking the interface.
That's right. So within the game of evolution, the only way you win is reproductive success. Absolutely. That's. But you're right that we're not stuck with that game, and we can think outside of that interface completely, and science allows us to do that, and we can write down mathematical models that are beyond space-time and beyond evolution, and then show how everything that we see inside evolution is, in some sense, a trivial projection of a much deeper and richer framework in which maybe there aren't, in which reproduction is not the goal, in which fighting for resources is not what's really going on. That is just your limited perception.
So when we talk about interface, I'm talking to you right now. You're on a monitor, unfortunately. I hate Zoom more than anything on this planet. Rob is sitting there, and in my interface, I'm talking to Rob. And in mine, he's talking back to me. I'm talking to you. You're talking back to me. Now, if I'm walking down the street and I see a homeless guy and he's talking to the wall or to whoever, he's just talking to somebody that I don't see. Whether he's on drugs or not, take that part away. Is that similar? Because in my interface, I'm talking to you, I'm talking to Rob, but Rob might not even be there. You might not even be there. It's just what I'm projecting in my interface, just like that guy who thinks he's talking to somebody isn't there, but he's having a full-blown conversation with nothing.
That's right. And there are patients that maybe have not been drinking or they're not homeless and so forth, but just have some kind of brain tumor or some kind of stroke that will have similar kinds of things where they hallucinate people, they hallucinate animals, they hallucinate conversations, and this really taps into something we were talking about earlier, which is at the very, very start. In fact, we're constructing everything that we perceive, right? You're the first year and a half of your life, you are building up your visual construction of the world. You have to wire yourself up. So now I'll use the anatomical and brain language for the moment, right? Even though I don't think it's fundamentally the final language. I'll use that language now. So your nervous system is wiring up. You make a lot of synapses. You're making a lot of connections, and the visual information and your interaction with the world and your experience of your hands and so forth is helping you to wire up an interface. But you're constructing it. And so it's no surprise that it doesn't take a big tweak to actually have the construction go wrong. And you're seeing stuff that's not useful, that is not helpful, that doesn't work. And that's what we say, it's not really there. So we'll say, so the guy's talking to the wall. You talk about the homeless guy talking to the wall. He might actually be experiencing some person there, for example. And that's not useful. It's like in Grand Theft Auto, thinking that your steering wheel is the brake. Well, that's not going to be a helpful thing to play the game of Grand Theft Auto. And so that happens a lot. And unfortunately, there are various kinds of ways that you can hallucinate things or fail to recognize that things have gone wrong. There's something called anosognosia, where a person might have, say, a stroke in the right hemisphere, and they have a left hemi paralysis. And for some people, they have no obvious awareness that there's something wrong. If you have this, it's usually only right hemisphere stroke with left hemisphere paralysis. It doesn't happen with left hemisphere stroke and right paralysis. Most of all those people go, yeah, there's something wrong. My arm is, I'm paralyzed. My arm is paralyzed. My leg is paralyzed. But these people, they'll say, is there, anything wrong with your left arm? And they say, oh, no, there's no problem. Well, Mrs. Smith, would you, and my friend V.S. Brahmakandran, again, had done some of these experiments. So something like, Mrs. Smith, would you, with your right hand, point to that light over there? And her right arm is fine. So she points, and you say, well, Mrs. Smith, would you point with your left hand to that light? And of course, nothing happens. Says, Mrs. Smith, why aren't you pointing to the light with your? Well, you're asking me too many questions, doctor. I don't. So she starts to confabulate. She'll make stuff up.
Right.
And so once again, she's. You can see that's the opposite of making up a new reality. It's ignoring a reality, and so both can go on when we're constructing.
So, but is Rob actually here, or is that just in my interface with my goggles on?
Well, so space and time itself is not fundamental. So it's just your headset, right? So
that's what I thought. That's what I was telling him. That's what I said when you went away. I said, in my opinion, no, you're not really here. It's just in my headset, to make simple. This is what's going on. But
that's right.
But if we can get past the headset, we would know that none of this is really here. This is just a projection.
That's right. And I guess a good metaphor, again, is the one you brought up, which is the metaverse. Again, say I'm playing Grand Theft Auto, and I see, and you guys are playing with me as well, and I see Tommy's avatar. Well, so does that Tommy avatar exist in reality? Well, it only exists when I render it. When I look over there and I see Tommy in his car, then it exists. Otherwise, now there is something beyond the headset, right? Mm-hmm. There is Tommy's consciousness, right, which is only all I'm seeing is my avatar of Tony in my headset, and that doesn't exist. So you're only seeing we're seeing our avatars, and we're rendering them on the fly. But behind that, there is. I'm proposing now. Again, this is a scientific proposal that's fallible, and of course, we'll find the limits of it. But I'm proposing that there is this consciousness that's deeper, and in fact, the theory I'm working on right now says that there's ultimately one consciousness. The mathematics of our theory entails that we can talk about all these little conscious agents, but they always combine to form bigger agents. And ultimately, because of this combination process, there is ultimately just one agent. But it's so complicated, I can never describe it. It's literally a theorem that it's impossible for me to describe it mathematically. I can point to it with the mathematics. I can describe all these little agents, and I can do big simulations of all these little agents, and that's what we're doing. But we can't ever, it's mathematically impossible to go all the way to the one, which is really interesting, because spiritual traditions have said that for a long, long time. But what I really think is going on here in that framework is all I'm seeing is, what I call, Tony and so forth. Those are just avatars that I'm seeing, but behind it is the one. So all three of us are just avatars that the one is using to talk to itself. So the one is having a conversation using three avatars right now.
That makes sense.
Right. So if somebody was outside of the interface, or like we keep saying, the metaverse, and they didn't have them on, they would see me just talking to myself. Right. You're right. Or you just talking to a screen that doesn't even exist, and Rob just sitting over there, maybe in his underwear, doing nothing. Right. Simple. Simple as that. Yeah.
It all depends on your interface. That what your interface lets you see and what it doesn't. And by the way, this has a lot to do then with the question about extraterrestrials, right? And the Fermi paradox. Where are they? I mean, where are they? Well,
I know.
The reason we don't see them is we have a headset on. We're looking for them in space and time. In other words, We're looking for these other intelligences and consciousnesses, and we're stuck in our headset, and we're going, where are they? Well, you can look on all the planets and galaxies in our universe. You're still stuck in your headset.
Right.
They could be all around you, and you can't see them because you got your headset on, and they're not
Outside
plugged into
of
your
that
headset.
headset. Because
Exactly
that
right.
all those galaxies and planets and everything, that's all within the headset.
That's all
But
on the headset.
outside of that headset, as I have a UFO here from Bob Lazar and fucking, I mean, that got destroyed. But you know what's funny? I was really into the UFO thing, and I went on my astrophysicist kick and flew everybody in the planet in. And then I started to think to myself, before I got more into you, Professor, I thought, let's just say this was reality. Now, if I can bend time, and I'm going to go a gazillion billion miles away, why in the hell would I come here in a craft? That's what I started thinking. And I would look over at my UFO from Bob Lazar, and I'd be like, shit. You know, if I can come a billion light years away, if this were reality, I sure as hell would not come in a craft. And then that ruined my theory. That ruined my UFO hope.
Well, yeah, and again, I'm no expert in this area, but it occurs to me as well that if it seems improbable that these intelligences would be able to create craft that bend space-time. They actually are so smart that they can actually change the geometry of space-time and do stuff that we, and then they come here and they crash. They're so stupid that they crash. That doesn't make sense to me.
Right.
I mean,
that's what killed me. Yeah.
So I'm not saying maybe there's something I'm missing here.
I don't.
But
like you're Mr. Professor guy. I'm just over here. But like you said, I'm just repeating one more time because I'm so disappointed. But when you say, okay, well, how could they possibly get here? Well, the only way they could possibly get here would be to bend time in some way, shape, or form. And you're going to tell me that they're going to use a craft, and then they did get here and it crashed? I don't see that happening.
Well, now, of course, the interesting thing is that
in the goggles, okay.
These aliens, whatever they are, they may not have the same headset that we have, right? And so what we see as craft, their crafts, may be the stupid projection into our trivial headset of a technology that we couldn't comprehend using the language of our headsets, right? So, for example, one thing that occurs to me is that if we realize that space and time are just a format of our headset, and we get our next step, say this theory of conscious agents is a useful next step, and it gets so precise that we can make new technologies from it. One technology I'd be interested in is travel. Right now, if I want to go through space and time to the closest galaxy, the Andromeda galaxy, it would take 2.4 million years at the speed of light. 2.4 million years. And that's the fastest you can go. But what if we actually know the headset and the software? Like I know that Grand Theft Auto software. And you know, right, the wizard in Grand Theft Auto has to drive through the space of Grand Theft Auto to get from one city to the next. But if I know the software, I could just literally take his car and move it from one city to the other, outside of the game, outside of the space-time of Grand Theft Auto. I could just move there, or I could take the tires off of his car. If he's too high on him, so I'll just take the gas out of his tank and remove his steering wheel. I can do whatever I want because I know the software of the game. So maybe one technology that will come out of the next step beyond space-time is the ability to travel to different places inside our headset, but not through space-time itself, outside of the headset. Just we understand the software. You want to go to Andromeda? Forget 2.4 million years. We'll just take you there right now.
Just like if you put the headset on and you want to watch the Lakers game tonight, you have floor seats, right?
That's right, because you know the software and you can make it happen. Once you know the software, you're the person who's the wizard inside the game is nothing compared to the software engineer outside the game.
And furthermore, just like when you do play a game now, even with Xbox or whatever, you can be talking and hanging out in that headset with somebody in China, Iran, Pakistan, within 1 second. You log in, you're hanging out in that game, headset, whatever, with somebody from Pakistan. Just like that. You take it a step further to what we're talking about, all of this is possible. It makes total sense to me.
Absolutely. And so for me, part of the excitement of developing this mathematics of conscious agents
This is really cool.
Effectively, we're taking the first step outside the headset that science has ever taken right now. In the last 10 years, we're going outside the headset. We're starting to figure out the software that runs the headset. The technology is going to be mind-blowing. And I want to see the technology.
I can't imagine what that board looks like. or freaking building. So going back to time, because this is another thing I read in, might have been one of the papers that I was reading. There is no time. You smash the clocks. Time is man-made. You know, the sun goes around, blah, blah, blah. It's lunchtime. It's dinner time. That's just a way to make, as you stated, life simple or the interface more simple. If you take away time and you take away religion, basically, you don't have war. You don't have war. If you don't have time, you don't have all this other craziness going on. So when that goes away, because they base it on and even animals, right, on the sun coming up, sun going down. In the ocean, the moon is a huge thing for everything, supposedly for waves, this, that, the other. So when time's out of the equation, period, the 24 hours, when you can separate the noise and take that out, how can you relate that all into, I don't think what you say is a theory. I think it's a fact. How can you put that in to furthermore making this a fact with no time?
Right. So what we're going to have to do is to actually write down dynamics beyond space-time, which there is no arrow of time.
Right. That's what I mean. The arrow, when you don't have an arrow of time, that's a bitch.
As I said, we can do that. It turns out you can write down dynamics in which the entropy does not increase.
You hear that?
So it's effectively what I think in many cases what that means is that you can run the dynamics forward or backwards and it's the same. But anyway, the idea is it's sort of a unified whole. The dynamics is a unified whole. But then when you take some kind of projection, a headset projection of it, then you get a decomposition of it into little parts, and it looks like these parts are evolving in time and so forth. But and then you might say, well, man, there's this amazing choreography over time of how these things get more complicated and how they interact. It's truly stunning. But all of that will be merely an artifact of a projection of something that just is coherent on its own and doesn't evolve in time.
So
and it's this is really having to think out of the box. But and ultimately we can't do the simulation of one, because what we would really need is the one, the infinite one, because that's the only anything that I do is going to be already a projection. So I'm already so already humility is the law of the land, right? Right. Immediately, what I love about this theory is it takes no time to find out what its limits are. It's right there in your face, and so you humbly then do what you can, and we'll see how far we can reverse engineer. But we'll always actually have in the theory we have a metric. Here's how trivial your progress is compared to what there is ahead. So we can see at every step, we can know exactly how trivial our progress is. And yet it'll be mind-blowing what the technology is that we can get.
I've just imagined, you doing it. I can never say his name right, but the best mathematician on the planet. I've read his books, watched them. I'm bad. Ever since I started the podcast thing in my interface, I've become dyslexic. I never was prior. I could say names and everything. Now I forget everything.
So all right, let's say I'm going to base something off of religion here. I'm going to base it off a God, let's say. A God. Whatever belief, you may be. There's a God, the one single entity. So would that single entity, that single God, technically be he's the one person, it's his interface, and we're all part of his consciousness, meaning I exist or I am here, but I'm through his consciousness, Tommy's through his consciousness, his or her or whatever you want to call it, you're here through his consciousness, that it's one single person, that it's their consciousness, all of us or what we're seeing. Does that make sense? I don't know if I'm explaining that right.
But yeah, I think that you're pointing in a useful direction. Again, I think we're all stuck with words, and words are inadequate because ultimately this one is so complicated that no words that we could use could ever describe it. So we're all going to struggle, like you were struggling, I'm struggling. We're all going to struggle. But the one thing I would say in addition to what you said is that this one, which transcends any scientific description we can give. I mean, we can prove. Well, that's a nice thing. We can prove in our theory that we can never get there. We can just prove it. So it's nice to know that you can prove your limits, and so you just sit there and go, okay, I can never get there. But I am the one, and you are the one. In an avatar. What is happening here is, and again, don't take the words all too literally, but we have to use words. Don Hoffman's not anything interesting. That's just an avatar. It's the one. There's actually an infinite intelligence behind that avatar and behind Tommy and so forth. There's an infinite, that same infinite intelligence. So an interesting question from within our headset to ask is, why would the one choose to project itself down into these different headsets, and headsets in which there are fights and wars and poverty and hunger? Why would the one choose to do that? That becomes, why would unbounded intelligence lead to the American political system? Right? Why would unbounded intelligence do that to itself? And homelessness and so forth. So this raises some very, very deep questions, and they're moral questions, but they're also intellectual questions, right? But if you think about it, why do we as game designers? I had the pleasure actually yesterday of having lunch with Thomas Vu, one of the top game designers in the world right now.
Yeah, he's huge.
He's huge, and so we had lunch together yesterday, and we were talking about these ideas with a few other fun people, and these kinds of questions do come up, right? So, and he's thinking about, he's going to have a book come out pretty soon, I guess, on this topic. And one thing that we talked about is that, well, why does he create games? Well, it's fun, and you get to explore and try different things, and ultimately, even if in the game there's poverty and so forth, it's just your avatar. It's not you. It's just your avatar in the game. And there's an issue. So why would the one let itself become unconscious, right? To be so absorbed in the game that it doesn't even know that it's the infinite intelligence behind the game. And so one possibility. And by the way, now I'm speaking way over my head here. I mean, this is. So I'm speculating, but it's fun to speculate, and don't take me too seriously.
But don't you have to speculate to try to then prove yourself wrong?
Exactly right. That's right. You have to go above your head and above your pay grade. So I'm way over my head and way above my pay grade.
I'm way above that. I was above that since I said hi to
you. but you got to. But you're exactly right, Tom. We have to make these speculations with the right provisos. Of course, I'm probably wrong, so that we can then find out why we're wrong and then move on to the next thing. But one possibility is that the one lets itself go unconscious and take the game seriously, just so that it really gets into the drama of the game. It really gets into that drama, and really. So, and the question is that just for fun, or is there something deep about this? I mean, one possible really deep thing about it, and I'm not saying that fun isn't deep. Maybe that's what it is. It's fun, and that's pretty deep. But it could also be, it's a theorem that no system can ever know itself completely, right? If I have a computer, and I say, okay, I want a program in this computer so that the computer actually knows everything about itself. Well, that can't be done, because every time you learn something more about yourself, the computer itself has become more complicated. So now you have to learn about what you learned, and you get in this cycle. So maybe the one can never know itself in principle. And so what it does is it looks at itself through lots of headsets, countless headsets. Space and time is just one trivial one. This is probably one of the least interesting ones. What about a 50-dimensional headset? What about a trillion different colors instead of three dimensions of color, or of hue?
Because that one can never, because the one will never have a headset. So that one that we can never get to, or at least at this point, is looking at everything through a trillion headsets.
That's exactly that's the idea. So I was about to say exactly right, exactly right about the idea. I don't know if it's exactly right about the truth about reality, but that's the idea. That's the idea to be shot down here. That's what I'm proposing to try to shoot down here. But it's an interesting idea that the one can only know itself, or maybe understand itself, through countless headsets. Or maybe it's all about love. And maybe if there's only one of you, there's nothing to love. You put on headsets to learn, and you immerse yourself in, and you put yourself in competition so that you learn what love is.
Love is.
Right? When I actually give the shirt off my back to somebody who needs help, or I give my hard-earned cash, or I take someone in, then I'm learning what love is, at least from the perspective of this headset. It's a useful look at what love really is. So again, I feel completely inadequate here, but these are at least pointers.
So then that one would get those feelings through all of us with the headset on, because that one can never have those feelings, maybe, to be able to create all of this. So therefore, being that one itself, whatever it is, can never feel anything or see anything like that, it has to do it in this manner.
That's a real possibility, that the one itself needs to put on a headset, as you were saying, Tommy. It needs to put on a headset, have those experiences that it wouldn't have otherwise without the headset, and find out what love means in this context, or find out what self-awareness means in this context, or what waking up means in this context. And there's countless contexts. So this is endless. It's unbounded. The exploration is infinite.
Now, has it been shot down mathematically and so on and so forth, that maybe a planet from wherever away, you're sitting there, I'm sitting there, maybe, don't look like this, and I'm on planet Z, and I'm sitting there with a headset on, watching myself on Earth go through all these things. Like, I sent an avatar to Earth to find out what's going on, to then upload and download data. Has that been shot down?
I don't know. I think it's at least is conceivable within this framework that kind of thing would happen. So I don't know that. I think this framework that I'm talking about has not been taken seriously enough to have someone try to shoot that kind of stuff down yet.
Would that go along with all of this, in a sense?
It absolutely could, and it also brings up another issue that some people have about what I'm saying. Some people think that I'm saying that something special about people, that our avatars are special, and that our consciousness is special, and I'm not saying that at all. So take an amoeba. What is an amoeba? Well, that's just an icon in my headset, from my point of view. But what is behind the amoeba? What's on the other side of the headset, right?
Right.
Well, it's the same thing that's on the other side of the Tommy headset that I've got.
Right.
It's the one. Well, what's on the other side of the amoeba headset? It's the one. So if I want to say, use the language, Tommy is the one, even though I know that's not exactly right. I mean, Tommy is just an avatar.
Yeah.
It's just an avatar of the one. Well, so the amoeba is equally an avatar of the one in my headset. And so, in other words, the distinction we make between higher organisms and lower organisms, or living and non-living, is not an insight into reality. It's entirely an artifact of the limitations of our headset. So I'm not giving humans the high point and we're the consciousness of the one, and a poor amoeba has no consciousness or small. No. I look at a piece of wood, a dead piece of wood or a rock. I'm interacting with an avatar of the one that is infinitely intelligent. So that's what I'm saying here. So in my conversation that I was having yesterday with a bunch of guys, that question came up, and I realized, oh, that's an interesting misunderstanding of what I'm saying that could come up. So I want to make this, there's nothing species special about Homo sapiens. We're not the ones that have the special consciousness.
You know, I would tell you, I've never. I would like to, but I haven't. I've never done DMT or the mushroom thing, but a lot of my friends did, and I started looking at grass and trees and leaves differently. Because, you know, do they have a conscience? Do they not have a conscience? This, that, the other. And when I watched them long enough, I put a camera out front of my house, slow-moed it, and it knew when to shift with the wind. It knew. It knew when to go a certain way. Even the grass, it knew. Now, I know it's through the headset thing, but that goes along with your point of what makes us any more special than a piece of grass, in a sense.
Well, that's right. That distinction is entirely an artifact of our interface. It's always the one looking at itself.
Yeah.
And sometimes it appears as a blade of grass, sometimes as a rock, but it's always. The fact is that our interface, because it dumbs things down, can't always give us a deep insight into the consciousness behind. That's what interfaces do. They dumb things down. And so, but what's the rookie mistake is to take the limit of my interface as an insight into the nature of reality. That's the rookie mistake.
Mm-hmm.
So to be very, very clear, I think that the distinction that we make between living and non-living things is not principled. It's not fundamental.
I agree with
it's entirely an artifact.
My neighbors thought I was insane. They thought that late. my neighbor thought I was like some goofball. Can you pull up tab 5? He's got killer papers, Rob. You got to read them. So now, to go along with the time thing, and I know it's through an interface, but when we look through the James Webb telescope, 5, Rob. And, you know, when you look through there, you could see things that happened 100 million years ago, however many million years ago.
Right. Doesn't
that alone prove that time doesn't exist? Because in this life, at 1:30 is over. There is no more 1:30. I can't see what happened at 1:30 again. But if I'm looking through the James Webb telescope, I can see something that happened however many gazillion years ago in my interface. So that tells me that further solidifies what I think, and I think you do too, obviously, that time doesn't exist. Because if it actually existed even in this interface, then how the hell can I see what happened supposedly a gazillion million years ago? Is it that I just want to see that, or is it just that there's no time?
Right. So I would agree with you that time itself is not fundamental, and that the experience of time is an artifact of the limitations of our interface. But for physicists, there is a lot of debate. So, for example, there's a very famous physicist named Lee Smolin, and I'll be at a conference with him in a couple months. We'll be debating these kinds of issues, and he takes time as fundamental. So he wants to take time as a fundamental reality.
Wow.
And so it'll be fun to discuss with him because he's a brilliant physicist and he knows everything that I've talked about and far more. He's a physicist and I'm not. He's a he's a theoretical physicist. On the other hand, there are others like again Nima Arkani Hamed and Ed Witten and the ones I mentioned before, David David Gross, who say that space time, therefore time, is not fundamental. And Nima makes a big point about this. He gave a class at Harvard in 2019, and so if you just Google Nima Arkani Hamed Harvard Lecture 1, you can actually see all of his lectures at Harvard on this graduate class where he's saying space-time is doomed and that time is doomed. And so you can see him grappling with the notion of time. So physicists themselves, in a very healthy way, are taking different positions. They're taking different views. Smolin is saying time is fundamental, and let's see where we can go with that. And Nima and others are saying, no, space-time itself is doomed. Let's see where we go and see how time arises. My own take is that that time has no operational meaning beyond the Planck scale, 10 to the minus 43 seconds, roughly. So that's it. That time, we know the scope and limits of the usefulness of time. It stops at 10 to the minus 43 seconds, and we need a deeper concept. So that's my view, is that time itself has to be let go.
So what do you when we're looking in that telescope, is that just a projection in this interface and none of it's real, in your opinion?
That's right. It's being rendered on the fly as we look. With everything that we experience. If you think about the game metaphor, and this is what I really enjoyed talking with Thomas Fu yesterday about this, because he talked about how in his games the thing it's rendered on the fly, and even the data that's used for these things is created on the fly. Some of these little avatars, until you interact with them, they only have like a sex and an age. That's all. It's only when you interact with them that all this information that downloads into the avatars. So, but then only then do you get a deeper rendering. And so when we look at things through our space telescopes, we create a new rendering, and then it exists as a render. What really exists, quote unquote, in the deeper framework is the one, and
outside of the game. Outside of the game.
Outside of the game.
The game is, that's so cool that you talk to him, because that's what this is, and who better to talk to? And then the goal, like you said, would be what's outside of the game. And then that's, I would assume, where the one is, and where, maybe there's a universe. Maybe who the hell knows what's out there, right? Or beyond this game.
That's right. My own attitude about it is that no description will ever come close.
Yeah.
Even mathematical descriptions will ever come close to fully exposing all the fantastic complexity of the one. Nothing will even get started in that. On the other hand, what we know from our human history in this interface is that most of our theories are nonsense and pointless. Every once in a while, you get a Newton, an Einstein, or a quantum theory, like Schrodinger and others. And the idea is less wrong.
Yeah.
And it has some kind of hooks. We're talking by Zoom. Why? Because we have these theories that allowed us to build technology that would be indistinguishable from magic for someone 2 centuries ago. This would be magic, what we're doing, mind-bending magic. So these theories, which we know are limited, which we know barely scratch the surface, nevertheless are giving us the power to do something we couldn't do otherwise. So we have to wrap our heads around that fact that on the one hand, our theories are trivial, and 99.99% of our theories are just flat out
Bullshit.
Bogus.
Bullshit. Bullshit.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Sorry.
And
You are a professor. Should be
but
saying sorry.
but the other the theories that we have that we know are ultimately going to be not the truth. Some of them have hooks into reality somehow, and that's a relationship I don't understand. So I'm very interested in understanding that relationship.
It's like when a girl catches you doing something, 1% of it's true, right? 99% is wrong, but that 1% is true, and you're doomed. And what you're doing is that 1%, you could take that and build off of it. I'm just making a joke because it's so, this stuff gets so thick,
Right. Yeah.
This is a great paper. Do you want to elaborate a little bit on this? The fusion of consciousness.
Oh.
This is great.
Yeah, this is our paper that just came out this year. And
down.
the key contribution of this paper is we're trying to make the notion of consciousness into a genuine scientific notion that's testable like in particle colliders, like the Large Hadron Collider and Fermilab and so forth. And what we're doing is the physicists, like Nima Arkani Hamed and his collaborators, are already for the last 10 years exploring what might be outside of space-time. And they're finding stuff, right? They're publishing paper. So this is all like the last 10 years. So this is brand new stuff. Most physicists don't know about it because this is just high energy theoretical physics. It's one small branch of physics. Most physicists don't know about it. But they're finding structures, and one of the deepest ones they found is something called a decorated permutation. Now, a permutation is like a shuffle. If you have a pack of cards and you shuffle the order, you're permuting the order of the cards. That's a permutation. And a decorated permutation is just a permutation. It's got a little technical twist that's not really important here. So the weird thing is, when they look beyond space-time, and they're trying to find what structures beyond space-time can actually predict the probabilities that particles in the collider will smash into each other and explode out, like 2 gluons smashing in and 4 gluons go. What they find are permutations. The deepest structure they're finding are like card shuffles. Now, you can imagine they're scratching their heads.
Yeah.
What in the world? So we're taking our first steps outside of the headset, and we're looking at what's outside of space and time. Card shuffles?
Yeah.
Like, who ordered that and why? You can
I want my money back.
I want my money. Well, I've been gypped here. I've been cheated. So what we did, we said, look, the physicists just in the last 10 years have discovered these static structures. So they're like geometries, like the amplitude-hedron is a geometry, and these decorated permutations are a mathematical structure. But there's no dynamics. And of course, physics likes dynamics. Right. So we said, is there some way that we could take our Markovian dynamics of conscious agents, which we say is outside of space-time, and map that dynamics onto what they found, right? Because if we can do that, suppose we could map our dynamics of consciousness onto the decorated permutations. Suppose we found that. Well, they could then give us the map from the decorated permutations into particle scattering in space-time. That's what they're doing. They've already done. So we don't have to do that hard work. We just get to plug into what they've done. So you can see, I want to cheat. The physicists have already found some structures beyond space-time. I'm going to plug into those structures. So what we did in the last year is we said, well, is there a mapping from Markovian dynamics onto decorated permutations? What is the mathematical mapping? And we did a search in the literature, and no one had done it. There was no general theory about mapping. So we did it. So this paper is a new contribution to mathematics. We say, here is a canonical map, and we found another one. So these are really beautiful maps that exist from Markovian dynamics into decorated permutations. So, and since this paper, what we've done is we said, now that we have the map, what part of the dynamics of the conscious agents corresponds to particles? Because now that we have this mapping into decorated permutations and from decorated permutations into particles, we can now say, okay, if according to this map, this is the part of the Markov dynamics of conscious agents that corresponds to particles in spacetime. And so we found that. And so now we're going through and we're saying, okay, so what properties of the dynamics corresponds to mass, energy, momentum, and spin? And we just published that in the Institute of Noetic Sciences had a competition. And the winners, it was a competition to get some experiments that would show that consciousness is not just a product of the brain.
That would be great.
And so we proposed this, a computational experiment, to show that we could go from a theory of consciousness through decorated permutations to predict scattering. And so that therefore we would show that consciousness was prior to particles, and particles are prior to the brain. So consciousness isn't a product of the brain.
Because you have the map, and then you're just implementing the encoding.
That's right. And so in our proposal for that competition, we wrote down our proposal for what aspect of the dynamics of conscious agents corresponds to mass. It's something called the entropy rate of these recurrent communicating classes. That last sentence I don't expect anybody to understand, but I'm just for complete. The mass corresponds to the entropy rate of the recurrent communicating classes, just to show that there is a technical term here that we're putting out. And spin, we have put that down. It has to do with the Markovian kernel acting on the basis vectors, and then also the momentum and so forth. So we put that all, and ours was one of the prize winners. So we won. We were one of 3 prize winners for it. So that's actually published. So that's what we're doing. So this paper gave the mapping from Markov chains of conscious agents into decorated permutations, and then our latest paper said, okay, now that we have the thread, let's start building a highway on this thread. What is mass? What is momentum? What is spin? What is energy? And that's what we're trying to do. So we're going to try to get a mapping of all the properties of conscious agent dynamics into space-time. And it's not because, by the way, you might say, well, why is Hoffman after all these particles? I mean, it's a little strange. There's all sorts of other stuff there's chemistry, there's biology, and there's the brain, right? Most of our knowledge about consciousness is about the neural correlates of consciousness. This part of the brain activity corresponds to color perception. This part of the brain corresponds to, motion perception. And if you have a stroke here, you can't see faces. So that's where we know the most about physical objects corresponding with consciousness. So why is Hoffman going after particles? And the answer is, I'm going after particles, not because they're the most interesting, but because they're the simplest. We have to start with that's the simplest thing in our interface. The particles of our interface are the simplest possible things. So you have to get the mapping really nailed down for the particles. You've got to have that completely nailed down before you try to crawl up to, the nucleus of the atom, and then to atoms, and then to molecules, and then to, biology, and then to the brain. Right? You have to work your way up. So particles, you have to start with the simplest thing and nail every step down.
Right, because you can't get to the answer to, this with the brain, that with the brain, without having this mapped down. It's like you're leaping 50,000 steps and just saying, do this. That's what I got from your paper.
Absolutely. And that's why I feel for my colleagues. Again, these are my good friends, and they're brilliant. Their IQs are off the wazoo. But the framework is, we're going to start with a complex object like the brain, and we're going to figure out how consciousness arises from the brain.
Go to that.
And I'm
next
all for neuroscience research. We need tons of neuroscience research, and I'm all for studying the neural correlates of consciousness. That's absolutely essential.
But you got to get that first part down, or at least somewhat down.
That's right. If you think that you're going to go from the brain to consciousness, it's not going to work.
Because you're already stuck in your consciousness then.
That's right. You're stuck, and you're using an interface symbol to try to boot up the reality behind the interface.
You're going to get nowhere.
If I only use what I know about the steering wheel and the red Ferraris and the gas pedals I see in Grand Theft Auto, how am I going to go from that to understanding the software in a supercomputer? It's just not going to work.
Well, we go back, Professor, to what we were saying in the beginning. The brain just wants to take what's easy. And what's easy is not starting with the particles. What's easy is just jumping ahead and saying, okay, we have this, and we're going to do this, this, and this is what we're going to live with. But you're not getting out of your own interface and consciousness by doing that. You have to go back to the beginning to figure out, as small as, like you said, the smallest particles and everything like that, to then get to that point. Not just to, okay, the A1 fires to the A2 and this beta antagonist in the brain causes a stroke on this side and will make your leg not work. Okay, great. But what's before that, right? This episode is brought to you by Fiji. More than just water.
This is not just rock. It's ancient volcanic rock that filters tropical rain, giving it double the electrolytes and its signature soft, smooth taste. It's not just water. It's Fiji water.
Exactly right. Now my colleagues
they hate that, I'm sure.
Well, no, what you said is correct. And what my colleagues are thinking, though, is they don't agree with me that consciousness is fundamental. They still think that space-time is fundamental. And they think that somehow unconscious matter, when it gets complicated enough in its functional properties, like neural activity, will create consciousness. They don't know how it's going to do it, but they're confident that eventually they will get there. Francis Crick thought this, right? Francis Crick and Tom Watson discovered the structure of DNA and, in some sense, demystified life, showing the structure of DNA. And Francis spent the last couple of decades of his life trying to do this with consciousness. He thought he could understand from neuroscience, get the right understanding of neuroscience that would lead to an understanding about how consciousness emerges. Just like the double helix structure sort of gave you a lot of insights into life, replication, and so inheritance, genes, all that stuff. He hoped the same thing would come out from neuroscience and neural correlates of consciousness. And I had the good fortune of knowing Francis, and there was a group of us that met at my University of California at Irvine, every month for almost 20 years. We met in secret because Francis was so famous that if anybody knew he was on campus, we'd be mobbed and we wouldn't get anything done. So there's a small group of us that met every month, and we were doing this. We were looking at the neuroscience and trying to understand the neural correlates of consciousness and trying to come up with theories about how brain activity could create conscious experiences. So very, very bright people like Francis Crick and most of my colleagues who are in this field are assuming that we start with brain activity or like integrated information, which is slightly more general, and somehow we'll get consciousness arising out of it. So that's their bet. What I'm thinking is they'll come to the point where they realize it's far more complicated, that actually we need, and I would say it this way, we need more funding for neuroscience, not less, because neuroscience and its relationship to consciousness is far more complicated and more difficult than we ever thought. We have to when we look inside of a brain through a microscope and we see a neuron, we thought that's because there is a neuron. No, you're seeing an avatar in your interface. The neuron is just a symbol in your interface. You have to reverse engineer that neuron and all of its synapses and all the network. You have to reverse engineer that to the software outside of space and time, which is far more complicated, which projects down to the brain. The brain, as complicated as it is, there's 86 billion neurons in the brain and trillions of synapses. Complicated, but it's trivial compared to its back projection, the thing behind it that we have to reverse engineer. So neuroscience is far more difficult than the neuroscientists realize. You see a neuron, that's just the start. We have to reverse engineer a neuron to who knows how complicated the networks are outside of space-time behind that neuron. But science is rigorous, and we know when we fail. And when I'm on stage with my colleagues and friends and I say, give me one specific conscious experience that you can explain, and they have to say, I can't do it. There's no hand wave. It's not like you know that you haven't done it. And so that at some point, the tide will turn when, it might be another century, maybe 2 centuries. Maybe we'll have to go for 2 centuries and have 0 conscious experiences that we can say, this is the pattern of neural activity that must be this conscious experience. It could not be anything else. And this is the principal. We won't have that. And after 200 years, maybe they'll finally say, well, maybe we better take the idea seriously that space-time isn't fundamental. But science will get there eventually. But we may have to knock our head on this wall for a long, long time.
Well, like you said, and like you said many times, scroll back up to the top. And then if you could elaborate on fact, fiction, and fitness, this is good too. You've said it many times. I think I heard you say you meditate. I can't meditate to save my life, but I can block noise out. Like you said, to do this, those neuroscientists and everything, they have to block out all the noise, everything they may have thought, no matter how dead set they are, block out the noise and just take a look without any noise. And I think that's how eventually in time, at some point, you'll get enough that will block out the noise from the outside, anyone around, anything, and just take a look. And then once I think they do, there's something here without ego,
I agree that on 2 different grounds. I mean, first, that the truly creative ideas, of course, you have to do your homework and you have to study and be a good student and so forth. You have to be diligent. But ultimately, the true breakthroughs and insights come when you then let that all go and you go into this silent creative space. You let go of all concepts. The true breakthroughs come. But I also agree with the other thing that you said, that it's letting go of ego is really, really critical. The attachment to ego and to, I'll put it this way. If I was really going after this for ego reasons, there are much nicer things to do than being thought of as a fool by my professional peers, right? There's so it helps to it's actually good. I mean, it's in some sense you just have to look at the ego and say you'd like to be thought of as really smart by your colleagues in your fields. If you do this kind of research, you're going to look like a nut, maybe for the rest of your life. So how does that feel? Well, it doesn't feel good to the ego. So, then I need to check my ego out, let go of it, and let myself be a fool and go ahead and do this work. And so being attached to the ego gets in the way. So, on the other hand, there's someone could reply and say, well, look, your ego's telling you something really important. You are a kook, and this is really, you shouldn't be doing this stuff. This is really, really nutty. You should, and so you have to be careful all the time, right? So what do I have good grounds for thinking that the current paradigm is wrong? And I think that the verdict of quantum field theory and general relativity is clear. Space-time is doomed.
Well, nobody's proved you wrong.
That's right. And our best theories agree that space-time is doomed. So let's get on with it. Let's move ahead.
Yeah. And
the faster, the better, in my view. But it's no surprise that my colleagues in the neurosciences are not on this, because most physicists don't understand that space-time is doomed. It's only a small group of high-energy theoretical physicists. This is their bailiwick. This is their arena. This is where they are the experts, and they're the ones that are saying, holy smoke, it's over for space-time.
And the one good thing about this generation, and there's not much, but the one good thing is there's a handful that aren't into the TikTok and the other BS. My lawyer's son is 16, and what he developed with the stock market and the trends, I mean, what he developed on a computer, he's not into all the craziness. He developed almost what Edward Dow did. I don't know if you know who that is, but we had him on, and he's a tycoon with trends. So like my audience here, like I said, they're 18 to 35, and then you have the older. Someone's going to see this that isn't into the TikTok and the bullshit, what I just post and ghost. And they're going to be like, And it might be that genius that's sitting there, or the genius that doesn't even know he's a genius and just starts digging. You know what I mean, Professor?
Absolutely, Tommy. And in fact, that is the primary reason why I do podcasts. Is I know that
as if you have the time to do it, as if you have 3 hours to do this right now. And I do appreciate it, sir. I want to tell you how much I appreciate it.
There's some goat herder in Nigeria, who has an IQ of 250. That if he hears this or she hears this, could run circles around anybody. So that's why I'm doing this. Is that I have a very limited IQ. I've been around really smart people, so I know where I stand, and I'm not one of them. There are these geniuses. So I'm just trying to get this stuff out there so that true geniuses can run with it, and I can just read their papers. And so that's in fact why I do this.
That's beautiful. Scroll down to this.
Yep.
So we can go to this. This is cool. You just have to read it. All these will be at the top of the description so everybody can read it. Just read the first part slow, and you get into it real quick. This is another good one, Professor.
Yeah, this is the paper that actually uses evolutionary game theory to show that evolution will never shape us to see the truth. No one gets to see the truth on evolutionary grounds. It's
just impossible.
Straightforward.
Go to the next tab. Bet you that one gets read more than any of them to begin with. Hit accept all cookies. Objects of consciousness. This is an easy read too. No, really, they are. They're not.
Oh, okay.
They're not too crazy.
I'm delighted. Yeah, because this is the one where we give our mathematical model of conscious agents. So it actually has the math and some initial theorems about the conscious agents. And this is the paper we're building on for our recent work trying to get particles out of consciousness.
I can't wait for that. And you see when you go to this, it's not all these crazy equations that, I don't have a high enough IQ, you know what I mean? But when the framework is there first, or a couple paragraphs is there first, then I'll look up the math then. I'll go and look what some of your colleagues do and say, okay, what does this mean? What does that mean? After I read what I can comprehend. You know what I mean?
Yeah, then you're motivated.
Yeah. Because now I want to know.
If someone says, just let X equal this formula, go, why should I be interested? But if you actually have some context, then you might be motivated to learn a little bit of mathematics to solve that problem. That's the way it is for me. I'm not a mathematician. I respect and look up to mathematicians, and I work with mathematicians. I'm not a mathematician, and I only learn the mathematics that I need to solve the problem that I'm interested in.
So go back up real quick, right down under evolution, because that's where I was reading through this. That's where it got me, and I started digging more and more and more down.
Where is that already?
Yeah, right there. Stop. All right. The human mind is predisposed from early childhood to assume sorry about my pronunciation, to assume the objects have shapes and positions in space, even when the objects in space are unperceived. It is reasonable to ask whether this assumption is a genuine insight into the nature of objective reality, or simply a habit that is perhaps useful but not necessarily insightful. See, that gets me going.
Yeah, there's a lot there.
With my 5 IQ, that gets me going.
Yeah, it's a shocking question. It's a shocking question because it's something that we just have assumed all of our lives, but once you put the question down there, you go, that is an interesting question. Of course, I know the answer. Of course, I know that we see the truth, but I should be able to just explain why I see the truth. And then when you start to try to do that, then you go, wow, this is a deep rabbit hole.
Yeah.
I didn't know.
Once you read that first paragraph, you go, okay, what's on the next paragraph? And then what's on the next one? and then the next one, and then you go back to maybe the one or two that you don't quite get, and then you can put them all together. And then you're like, whoa, okay, calm the noise. Let me think about this, you know? Now, Professor, when people do DMT, for example, you know, the Toad one, real strong psychedelics, and they break through to another reality.
Yes.
Now that's still in the game interface. But is there any interest to you how they break into this other reality and they seem to come back, not nutcases, they come back with a different perception on reality, life, nature, everything? Do you think there's anything to that more than just?
I think so. I think that there's a lot to explore there, and it could be very, very powerful. And
don't lose any grants.
There's a deep research project that I see here, and I'll just say it from this point of view of the conscious agent theory. We're going to want to take the theory of conscious agents and these network of interacting conscious agents and show how that creates an interface. We want to build a network of conscious agents that actually then itself constructs our space-time interface, right? So it turns out that conscious agent networks are computationally universal. Anything that you can do with a neural network or a computer, you can do with conscious agent networks. So we can build networks that compute stuff. So we can use a network of conscious agents. It'll be hard work, but to actually show how you build the space-time interface. Once we do that, and it won't be tomorrow, we want to take that network that builds the interface. We want to now turn it around and have it look at the very network that computes it. Mm-hmm. What does that network look like from the point of view of the interface that's made? Right?
Yeah.
You see, this is very self-ref. What if we succeed? What it will look like is brains and neurons.
Yep.
That's what so when we take the network that computes our space-time interface and we turn that network back on the part of this whole network of conscious agents that's building the interface, it will look like brains and neurons. That's what I meant. We have to reverse engineer things. So then we can then start to ask your question more technically. So someone takes DMT or MDMA or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
What is that drug in the interface? We have to reverse engineer the drug into the network of consciousness. What is it doing to this network of conscious agents that's building the interface? How is it altering that network? And then we can start to answer the kinds of questions that you're talking about. In other words, there's a real research project here. My guess is it'll depend on the drug, and that some drugs will be completely uninteresting. They basically just screw things up.
Yeah.
And other drugs may actually be very interesting and might actually point to interesting glitches in the matrix that we can begin to exploit to understand more deeply how the matrix is composed and how it's constructed.
That's why I brought it up, because, and I know some I mean, they wouldn't admit it on, in front of 5 million people or 10 million people, but they're, extremely smart people. And when I go through your work, and from what they've told me, I'm afraid I'm going to be that one guy that does it. I'm the one that keels over in this interface. That's how I'll be that one in a million, But
right.
if you can smoke DMT, if you can take a certain type of mushroom and you're in reality, but you're not. So like when you trip on LSD, you're still here. You're not like in La La Land, but you're seeing things, you're breaking through things, you're seeing things that you wouldn't see under this consciousness or this interface naturally, especially the DMT. So I've seen people come back from that, totally different people, and turn into multimillionaires. It's really weird.
Wow.
But they would do it, and they would come back and, like I said, be more in touch with nature and things, and they could feel the negativity around them. and they would have the guts, to disassociate themselves with certain people and progress. My point is being, if they can take that, which, like a mushroom's natural, real MDMA, there's a lot of studies on that. Remember the guy who made that? He made that for depression. It's like the best drug on the planet for depression until you start mixing it with all this other craziness. But if you can break through to another consciousness with that, then that, to me, proves everything we've been talking about.
It certainly is data that is supportive.
Supportive, right? Supportive.
Absolutely, yeah. So supportive of this kind of approach. It certainly is. Although my colleagues who are physicalists and neuroscientists would disagree. They would say, look, we'll get the story about how consciousness is created by the brain, and we'll understand how these drugs affect how the neurons themselves create the consciousness. So that would be their kind of response.
And how are they going to do that?
Yeah, exactly. I don't think that they. I would bet good money that they'll never get it.
I just seem to think that not promoting or anything like, but under the right circumstances, if doing a thing like DMT was studied by guys like yourself and so on, that might be one of those markers to what's outside of this. Big marker. That's what's outside of this metaverse or game.
I think you're right, and I think that the research will be interesting and also difficult because it requires actually having at least some grasp on the software outside of our interface.
Right, you can't jump ahead.
We have to actually do one step at a time here. Right. But what we can do is get the empirical data that's suggestive. But then we'll need the deeper theoretical framework to properly interpret it. Because right now, the theoretical framework will be neurons create consciousness, so we're going to interpret it in that framework. And that will only get you so far, and then you'll get stopped. You'll get good neural correlates, and that's perfectly fine. That's great work, and it should be done. But the deep theory will escape you. But if you
start with the particles and figure out the consciousness, and then connect that with the outcome from the studies from the DMT or whatever psychedelic, right, then you start to make progress.
Then you could really make progress. But it's not going to be an easy. Right? We have to. It's a lot of work.
I have to move.
That's right. So that's why. By the way, for those who are interested in doing the work, here's the kind of background you need to actually make. If you want to contribute to the theory, right now I'm looking for someone with a PhD in algebraic geometry and someone who's got a PhD in high energy theoretical physics who knows Nima and Karni Hamed's work. Those are the kind of people that, if they're interested, I would want on the team immediately for the steps that we're taking right now. But you can see this is no hand wave. You actually getting a PhD in algebraic geometry is not a trivial thing. It's a very, very difficult topic, or a PhD in high energy theoretical physics. But that's what's going to be needed. So I get emails a lot of times from people who don't have advanced degrees and think that they can crack this.
No.
And they may have IQs that are twice mine, and insights and intuitions that are far better than mine. But there's no chance to actually break the problem open unless you do the homework and actually learn the math, learn the science. It doesn't matter. It's great to be that smart, but that's not enough. You've got to put the years in and learn the math and the physics and the cognitive science, and then your intelligence can help break through. So you can't have the real insights that are going to be useful until you've actually done your homework.
Do you know who Robert Beto is?
Sounds familiar.
He has that. Well, what was the second one you were looking for? I don't want to jamble it up.
So algebraic geometry is one PhD. Yeah. The other is high energy theoretical physics, especially the work of Nima Arkani Hamed and his collaborators.
Yeah, we know. We've had him in, and this is funny. He does have a PhD in that. That's what he does. Yeah. His name's Robert Beto. Cool guy. And the way I met him, it's funny how you meet these like super insanely smart guys. He's into like
Death metal, like
death metal.
heavy metal.
He's into heavy metal.
Wow.
And just to tell a quick funny story, he does all this mind bending stuff, and he went to an island that they wouldn't let him do what he wanted here for whatever reason. You know, he was along the lines of this. There was no Big Bang. When I had him in, it was 4 hours. We were, our jaws were on the floor. You know, this was 2 years ago. There was no Big Bang. This is all, you know, and he's from Ukraine actually. So he had the accent, and this is bullshit. This is all bullshit. This does not exist. Remember?
Yeah.
None of this exists. So he went and he built, and he was proving with something that he was doing that I can't comprehend, that he could create energy for an entire island with ocean water. But he did it in a way that I can't speak like him, but he did it in a way that would go with this, because it's all math and crazy stuff like that. Okay, he did it. You know what they did? They blew it up. They blew it up. Yeah, they blew it up. The U.S. blew it up because of whatever political, however they were making money.
Free energy.
Yeah. Free energy. He did it through math. He created free energy to completely the entire island. That wasn't like some little like ditch island. I mean, it was an island of, I don't know, a couple 100,000 people. Electric, everything. You know, they were starting to build grids, and he did all this thing from one little thing in the ocean.
Bobbed up and down.
It just bobbed up and down. He did it. It took him maybe a year and a half, 2 years to do it, and they blew it up. They blew it the hell up. I'm gonna, if you don't mind, I'm gonna connect you with him. He's a really cool guy, and he has that degree that you just said.
Are there any articles about this? The U.S. doing this?
I'm sure.
Published articles, newspaper articles, or
yeah. If you type in Robert Bado, Bado, you'll see. You might be on like Google page 9,077,000 million. You know, but if you're interested, I'll get you in touch with him. He's a really cool guy. And
yeah, let me look him up.
Jesus,
absolutely
he's smart.
Right, yeah. Because we need people smart like that.
Yeah, and he's pissed. And he's pissed. So he likes to go. He's one of those ones that, you know, when I first started to get into this, he's very, you know, as a Ukraine guy, he's very straightforward. Let's just say, and he you know, he's the physicist guy, the math guy. He's got like 20 freaking degrees, and he just calls them all idiots. And you know, they write something and they think that that's it, and they do this, and their ego. The whole problem is their ego, and this was before the Ukraine thing happened. And he goes, I'd like to put them in third world countries so that they would lose their ego and understand to keep an open mind. You know, this whole thing. But I think that would be interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, any connections with people with you know, like algebraic geometry PhDs and high energy physics PhDs would be appreciated, because and it doesn't mean that they even have to collaborate with me. I mean, if we put them onto these problems, like, you know, I can talk with them and say, here's some of the open problems, and they may just want to take it on and do their own thing. Yeah,
he's the type that would spend 37,000 hours trying to figure it out too.
That'd be fabulous.
So a couple last things. I don't want to take up too much of your time, and would love to talk to you.
My body is fading. I've got this long COVID thing.
Oh shit! Yeah, I wanted to. I'm glad you made it through that. Now, when you went through that, you you know, I remember you saying, I think it was on Lex. You know, called your wife, told her you loved her, and you weren't for a second there. And if I'm putting words in your mouth, I'm sorry, but for a second there, you lost like track that you're in this game, this interface, right? When that COVID got really bad.
Yeah.
How did you snap in and out of that when you're in the situation you're in?
Well, yeah, I got to the point where my heart situation was so bad, I just assumed I was at the point of death, and so I didn't end up being like super spiritual or anything. I was just scared. So I saw where I was, and that was a little over 2 years ago, and it's been a tough 2 years. My heart has been permanently damaged, and so I've had to be very, very careful, even just walking upstairs. Before I was going to the gym and trying to keep up with the young guys at the gym. That was just 2.5 years ago. I was doing that and pushing heavy weights and so forth. And now I have to be very, very careful. So it looks like COVID has permanently changed me. We'll see. Maybe over the next couple of years, if the heart improves, the rest of my body seems to be okay, but the heart is pretty central. And so my energy, after a couple hours, I have to be very, very careful to not overtax my heart and let it continue to recover here. And
I'm very good friends with
in the right direction.
I'm very good friends with Dr. Robert Malone, and he's been in a bunch of times. I talked to him, and he had the same issue, and he was actually a vegan, and they wouldn't let him do any studies here on how to come up with something to fix the long COVID. So he went to Japan, and all he could find, believe it or not, was meat. Eating a lot of meat, and he looked a hell of a lot better when I saw him 2 months ago than he did a year ago. I mean,
Yeah, I'm trying to really take care of myself, eat plenty of protein and of course, a balanced diet and do the exercise that I can. So I do the exercise that I can, but then I also try to make sure I don't push too far.
All right, last thing, I'll let you go. So when we're done here on this interface, what do you think happens? And the answer can't be, I don't know.
Well, of course, that is the right answer, but I can speculate.
So yeah, could you speculate, and then I'll take the handcuffs off you.
I think that we have some hints from people who've had the near-death experiences, right? They talk about seeing a tunnel of light, and many of them experience peace and joy and a life review. And then the ones that we get to talk to are the ones that come back afterwards. My guess is the one is the one, and you are and I are the one, and the one probably is welcoming itself back, and there's just love, period, and all the things that most of us are asleep all of our lives. We don't know who we are. We think that I am this person that has this car and this house and this reputation and did this and that, and that's who I am. So you look at your curriculum vitae, your accomplishments, your name, your address. That's me, and you realize, oh no, you wake up and no, that was your avatar, and the avatar is not you at all. Your avatar in Grand Theft Auto was not you. It's just your avatar. And if the avatar gets smashed in Grand Theft Auto, no great shakes. That wasn't you anyway.
Pull up his website last time. Go ahead.
So I think that's my guess, is that it's a homecoming. But if you want a humorous take on your question,
but that's what you think, though, right? You think that we all go back to one, all of us. So I'll see you back at one, whatever the hell that is.
That's right. Even those who have done things that we call horrendous.
Yeah.
But there's a humorous take on your question, and for those who haven't seen the movie, Defending Your Life with Mel Brooks, that's a fun take on it. I'm not saying that's the truth, but if you want a good laugh, in the area of this question, that's a fun take. Defending Your Life.
Great. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. Hopefully I get to talk to you in person. We'll have all the links. The two people that you're looking for will have in. Beto, I'll shoot to you. And thank you again so much for your time, and I hope you feel better.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it, Tommy.
Thank you.
Take care.
All right. Hope to see you in person soon. Thank you.